Good evening, everyone. Welcome to council. Full house tonight. I always like it when people are here. It makes it even more real. So welcome. Let's all rise for a moment of personal reflection. I'd like to ask Councillor Gardner to lead us in the singing of the national anthem.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. Car ton bras sait porter l'épée, il sait porter la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. There's a lot of feeling in that.
Had to get that.
So we acknowledge that we are gathering on the traditional territory of the Mohawk people of Akwesasne. Roll call, Madam Clerk.
Mayor Bernadette Clement,
Présent.
Councillors Claude McIntosh,
Present.
Elaine McDonald,
Present.
Sid Gardner,
Here.
Dean Hollingsworth,
Present.
Councillors Maurice Dupel,
Present.
Glenn Grant, Todd Bennett,
Here.
Justin Towndale,
Present.
and Éric Bergeron.
Present.
Councillor Hébert has sent her regrets, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Any additions, deletions, or amendments? Councillor Bergeron, then Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules of council to allow for a presentation from Rodney Rivette and Terry Muir.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Towndale? So is the motion, when is this presentation to take place?
Tonight.
I would suggest during the discussion about the fire ban.
Okay. Can I ask Madam CAO or Madam Clerk to comment?
Through you, Madam Mayor, so we have presentations on the agenda, so we have a delegation as well as a presentation and two delegations. We could put it on as a third presentation after the other two, I think would be, although it is certainly in relation to an item that's on the agenda tonight, but I think it could go following the other two.
I'm okay with that.
Okay. So, Madam Clerk, can you explain how this motion would work, please?
So this motion's here to suspend the rules will require 2/3 majority from the council members attending this meeting, which means that we need 7 in favor, and those 2 have to be on the prevailing side, which both were on the opposed of a motion that was defeated originally.
Sorry, through you.
Oh, sorry, no, I'm talking about
Yeah,
another
no,
motion, sorry.
so through you, Madam Mayor, we have a motion on the floor for reconsideration. We just need 2/3 of a majority from council to suspend the rules to allow a presentation to be put on the agenda on tonight's matter that wasn't previously published, so.
So it's a motion to suspend, not a
Yeah,
motion to
it's a motion,
reconsider.
it's a motion to suspend.
Point of order, Your Worship. Is it debatable?
Yes, it is. So a motion to suspend is not, so the mover and seconder on the motion to reconsider, that one, only the mover and seconder will speak, and then you don't debate the rest of the issue. But on this one, a motion to suspend the rules, everybody gets a chance to say how they're going to vote and why.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to speak last if I may.
So we have a mover and a seconder and debate. Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't see any need for a presentation. We had great public consultation. We look at all the paperwork we have here, I think we debated this publicly to death. Presentation will do nothing to support anything, in my estimation. I've got all the information I need to make a sound decision here. The presentation is not necessary, and I wouldn't suspend the rules for it. There's a procedure here that people request. Sometimes they're approved, sometimes they're not. They're not, they come here to appeal to us, appealing, and I'm not supporting it.
Councillor DePel and then Councillor Towndale.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you. So was the presentation, was there a request for the group to make a presentation to council through our normal process?
I'll ask the clerk for that. Thank you, Councillor DePel.
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes, the group did make a request to make a presentation. It was denied because the public consultation was happening at that time. They were invited to have their say that way, and a note was sent to council at that time saying that if they were to approach council, we needed 2/3 majority to suspend the rules.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Towndale and then Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will support the suspension of rules. That was a presentation. I realize, actually, I'm hearing the reason why it was not approved at the first time. The email that was sent to council just says that it was not approved, and that's pretty standard whenever a presentation is approved. But regardless of the fact that there was public consultation, I think we should hear this presentation. We do have a copy of it. However, you know, the amount of effort and time that went into it is very impressive. But beyond that, you know, in the past, we've had groups come forward to discuss bylaw changes with us. Whenever we're talking about the no smoking bylaw in Lamro Park, the Lunkers Club, I think it was, yeah, I think it was, could have been another club, I could be mistaken on that, came and presented to us about the bylaw. Here's another group of citizens who want to come forward and present to us about a bylaw, about a decision we're about to make. We have other presentations on the agenda, this is true. 2 of them are suggestions on what we can do to improve public space in the city. And, you know, they are valuable and these are permitted. And as these are permitted, I think the presentation from the citizens against the fire ban should be permitted as well, just like the other groups that presented to us. So I support it. Thank you.
Councillor Bennett and then Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Madam. Through you. Last year when I voted to repeal, my 2 biggest concerns were health issues and nuisance. And so reading some of the stuff I've heard, received since then, conversations from the open house that we had, there apparently are ideas that will help address those 2 issues. So for me, I would like to hear those and see if there's enough information there or ideas that will work that would make me reconsider my vote. So I'd like to hear the presentation for those reasons. Thank you.
Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Your Worship. Excuse me. I've often heard many councillors, yourself included, indicate that public consultation is never a bad thing. There's no such thing as too much public consultation. We talk about getting feedback in any means necessary. We can have our Facebook page and newspaper, Instagram, Twitter, whatever those things are. We can have public meetings, but this is really where we do our business. And so if a group would like to present to us here, it's kind of where there is an absolute upside in that, number one, we as a council who ultimately make the decision are a captive audience. The other thing that happens that I think is a good thing is it tends to be fairly structured and organized and regimented so that we can have, the group can make a presentation, you know, in a, how do I want to put it, in a much more formal setting where we kind of can ask questions if we choose or not. So because public consultation is never really a bad thing, and I'm not convinced that there's such a thing as too much public consultation, especially when we have a contentious kind of motion that's going to be discussed this evening. But even the rubber stamps, the ones that everybody feels comfortable with, you're never completely sure that something might come to light that you hadn't thought of before. So I will in fact support the motion to suspend the rules so that this particular organization can make a presentation.
Councillor Gardner and then Councillor MacDonald.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I did the same thing during the budget presentations. I wanted to hear what another person had to say, so tonight I will do the same thing. I will vote in favor of allowing whoever the group's leader is to speak.
Councillor McDonald?
Well, Madam Mayor, through you to my peers, I support Councillor Grant. I believe that I attended 2 public consultation sessions, and I know that one of the groups brought forward a method whereby we could possibly, with a lot of busy work on our fire department, somehow have enough checks that we could allow people to have burns. This has never been about disallowing people to have burns. This is simply about asking people not to burn a fuel that will hurt or inconvenience your neighbor. Because you can get as much emotional impact from your family if you have a fire that's fueled by gas as you can if your fire is fueled by wood. But if your fire is fueled by wood, then obviously you have the potential of harming the health of anybody who's within breathing space of that fire. So I don't think this group has anything more to contribute. I think I've listened ad infinitum to the arguments, and frankly, when you come to a consideration of a person's health, then I think that trumps other things. That trumps the pleasure of burning wood. If you can't get the same emotional charge and build the same family bonding over a fire that's fueled by gas, by natural fuels, then sorry. We live in too constricted a space. Our neighbors are too close to us. And frankly, Madam Mayor, after both public consultations, I talked to so many people who felt they were intimidated. They had suffered, many of them for years, breathing in the smoke from fires that they couldn't control, and they did have to go inside their houses, close their windows. People shouldn't have to do that. So I think that this is one of the compromises that we have to do if we're going to live in a city and not live in some isolated area. If you're not in close proximity to other people, burn what you want. But when you're living in close contact with other people, then I think this is one of the many ways that you have to be considerate of your neighbor. So I think this issue has been done to death, and I'm ready to vote on it now. So I don't choose to have another presentation because we've already got 2 presentations furthermore, and so I don't support the motion to suspend the rules.
Councillor McIntosh?
I'd be a lot more at ease if we had both sides presented tonight. But we just got the one side, so we're going to hear from one side of the story. And the other side, we're not. So we've got an issue with that. And the time of it, the timeliness of it.
Councillor Bergeron?
Thank you. So I want to be clear. I'm not making a motion to have anything to do with the fire ban except for the idea that someone can present information to us. You're still free to vote however you like when we get into that debate. So the arguments that you just made, I believe, are for when we talk about this bylaw. To me, talking about one-sided, the bylaw coming forward to us, and we've all read it, is a complete ban. I would like to hear from the people who have made a presentation that is included in our agenda. So we've all read it. There's nothing here that we haven't read. This isn't a surprise, presentation. I don't see how this is any different than the 2 presentations we're about to receive, which I have no issue with. What I do have an issue with is not listening to all of the information that can be presented. So when you say one-sided, I disagree with that. I think I would like to hear Mr. Rivette and Mr. Muir. I did ask about this in December to the clerk. I have asked about why this wouldn't have come to council in the past. The answer was to bring it forward this way, and so I'm following that process. I wanted this information presented to this council. I respect that this council gets to decide who is presented to, although the next 2 presentations we did not vote on. They are here today because they meet a criteria that we didn't vote on. We have a 2,000 signature petition that's going to be presented to us. I think we have a bit of a duty to listen to that. You can still vote as we go through this debate however you like. this motion is to hear more information. No matter what side of a debate I'm on, I will always support hearing more information. Thank you.
So a point of
So,
clarification, Madam
Councillor
Mayor.
Gardner?
I heard initially that Mr. Rivette was going to make the presentation. Now we have two people making the presentation? Is that correct?
Madam Clerk, are you aware of who's making the presentation?
Part of the motion was to hear Terry Muir and Rodney Rivette.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, so you've gotten to know me a little bit. I've gotten to know you over the last year, first year of this term. And I will always tend to want to hear from people. I'm pretty consistent in that way. This is why, after our first discussion, I wanted to press pause and have a special council meeting so that we could do public consultation. So to your point, Councillor Hollingsworth, public consultation is terrific. The more we do, the better it is. That doesn't mean that we are abdicating or giving up our right to do our job as council. But the act of hearing and listening is always a good part of the process. It's why we had the special council meeting and press pause, and it's why we did the public consultation, we had those meetings. It's why we received all of the comments. And so, I'm going to vote to support the motion to hear more. Doesn't guarantee how this council is going to decide, but everyone will have an opportunity to be heard. That's the process.
Point of clarification.
Councillor McIntosh.
If the motion passes, will we ever question the two presenters?
So I will turn to the clerk, although our usual process is if there is a presentation, there is usually an opportunity for council to ask questions. Madam Clerk?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I would have the same opinion.
Yes? Make a positive.
So I'm going to call for the vote.
Recorded vote, please.
Madam Clerk?
Councillors Claude McIntosh,
No.
Elaine McDonald,
No.
Sid Gardner,
Yes.
Dean Hollingsworth,
Yes.
Modeste Tupel,
Yes.
Glenn Grant.
Nope.
Todd Bennett,
Yes.
Justin Towndale,
Yes.
Eric Bergeron.
Yes.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
1, 2, 3, 6, 7. It carries, Madam Mayor.
So, as discussed earlier, that presentation is going to go after the other presentations. Councillor Grant?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So awareness that presentations are 5 minutes, right?
Madam Clerk?
Through our regular procedural bylaw at the moment, our current procedural bylaw, we will allow 10 minutes for delegations.
5 minutes and 5 minutes more,
Yes.
if council agrees.
You're correct, Councillor.
Okay.
Do we stop after 5 minutes and vote, or do we vote beforehand?
So when we get to that point, we'll have that discussion, Councillor McIntosh?
Okay, that's fair.
Okay. Adoption of any other motions or any other additions, deletions? I think Councillor Hollingsworth had his hand up.
Thank you, Your Worship. If I could, on the agenda, bylaw 20.6, if I could have that voted separately at the time when we vote for the bylaws. I believe it's actually 2020-040.
Just the one bylaw, Councillor?
Just that one, that's it, that's all.
Do you have that, Madam Clerk?
I
Got
do.
it?
Any other additions or deletions?
I have a few, Madam Mayor.
Go ahead.
So the first announcement is just that we have printed a revised agenda on Friday to allow our MP, Eric Duncan, to address us this evening. And we are adding a bylaw to the agenda for the acquisition of 1004 Marlow Avenue, which then changes the number of our ratifying bylaw.
So I'm looking for a motion to adopt the agenda as amended. Councillor Bennett, Councillor Gardner, any discussion? All in favor? Carried. Any disclosure of interest? Councillor Dupel?
Sorry.
No? Any disclosure of interest? Seeing none, need a motion to go into committee of the whole. Councillor Bennett, Councillor Towndale, all in favor? Carried. We have minutes for the meeting of January 27, 2020. Need a motion to adopt the minutes. Councillor McDonald, seconded by Councillor Bennett. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried. Presentations, Madam Clerk.
So before we move to our 3 delegations this evening, we would like to invite Eric Duncan, our MP, to address council on his new role.
Welcome to council.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. It feels different to be on the other side of the table here, not in Cornwall per se, but just down the street at County Council. I appreciate the invitation to be here tonight. I know you have a few items in your agenda to go through, so I won't make this too long. I'll stick within my time frame. But in speaking with Her Worship and CAO Adams, we had a productive meeting, I guess, say a couple of months ago. Time flies when you're having fun in a new role. But she had invited me to speak to council tonight, just to let you a little bit know about myself and some of the local setup we have here in Stormont, Dundas, South Glengarry, but also some of the files that I've been working on to date and hope to engage council on over the course of our term of Parliament, however long that may be. Just first to give you an update, I'm proud that we're keeping a full-time office, a constituency office in the city of Cornwall. I'm very fortunate that all of my predecessor, Mr. Lozon's staff, have agreed to stay on with me. We've moved locations over to Brookdale Avenue, 691 Brookdale Avenue, to the International Business Plaza. And I tell everybody we're right south of the traffic circle, and if they don't know where that is, right beside St. Hubert's, and everybody knows where that is. So.
Yep.
We're open there again, same as before, Monday to Friday, 8:30 to 4:30. And one of the timely announcements we've done in the last couple of weeks is we've continued the partnership with the Community Volunteer Income Tax Program. We have a wonderful group of volunteers that, if they keep on pace of past years, will help 6,000 people with their income tax returns over the course of the next couple of months. So as you're out in the community, if you're knowing somebody, a senior or any age demographic that's of a lower income that could use this free service, it starts on Tuesday, February 25th at our office and runs daily. And if they have any questions, they can contact our office. And that there has been a service we've started a couple of years ago with the staff and the volunteers, and we're proud to continue that in our new location. So please help us spread the word of that. Infrastructure is something I've had the opportunity to speak in the House of Commons a few times. I've asked some questions. I've given my maiden speech. Unfortunately, most times I've been able to speak has been on the topic of infrastructure. And I do appreciate the live tweets from the media and the reports of the council meetings online afterwards, while I can't be here to know what's going on. And read with interest as you go through your budget process, a common concern that I'm hearing from a lot of municipalities about timely response to infrastructure applications. My interventions in the House so far and my questions have been about the frustration and delays between municipalities applying for dollars and getting approvals. And I was watching whatever day the budget meeting was last week, and I texted...
3 days.
3 days, yeah. Which of the 3 days it was, but I texted the CAO, I think it was on Wednesday or Thursday, just to say, is there an example? And I believe there is, where council and staff are waiting to hear back on some applications. As you complete your budget process, I'm sure staff are anxious to go to RFP and to go into that process. And I believe it's been 8 or 9 months now. So one of the, like I say, a bipartisan aspects that I can bring to the job is my experience being in municipal politics, to say that we can do, we can debate how much money is spent on infrastructure, which is important. But to me, equally important is when we have infrastructure funding envelopes, that the application process and response to municipalities be in a timely manner, so you know yay or nay when most municipalities do their budget, if you have those dollars or not, and they can go to RFP in a timely manner. The challenge is now, in speaking to some municipalities, if you're waiting another month or two to go out to RFP, to have it come back, to get approved by council, to have shovels in the ground, the cost of those RFPs could be significantly higher. And of course, you run into definitely timelines with winter construction and those types of things. So that's something that I want to raise with you, that I've been working with administration on, and will continue to do that and advocate for that. A couple of local files. We had a productive meeting, like I said, a couple of months ago, and I won't take up too much time, but open to any questions or comments you may have for me. But I am very interested in the port divestiture program and continuing to make sure that whatever the desire of the city and Akwesasne are in that joint venture, it becomes a reality, and anything we can do, myself as a federal liaison to help with that, I'm certainly interested. It wasn't 5 minutes into our meeting, I think, or after the election, that the mayor had said, we got to talk about the Transport Canada surplus lands. And I've had not only meetings with the mayor and administration, but spoke to members of council and different community groups that are interested in that. I'm hoping to have a meeting with Minister Mark Garneau, who's the transport minister, in the coming weeks or months to talk about this and getting some other briefings on this to try to come up with a process that I think is fair to the city, to Akwesasne, and the partners that are interested. And I expect to come back to council through administration, I believe, in the next couple of months with some asks for request about a process and how we can make sure at the end of the day, whatever is done with those lands are in local control and a local say, whatever that may be. So that is a file that I think is timely because I just don't want to see a decision made at a federal level that circumvents the local say or the desires of council, the community, and Akwesasne in this case as well. And then the other two quick things I'll note as well is affordable housing is something that is a passion of mine in our community. I could probably be here till late, so I will summarize quickly that I think there's some tools with the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. When it comes to what I call the middle development of housing, multi-res housing, we are not seeing, I think, numbers that resemble the need in our community. And I say that to the City of Cornwall, and I also say that for the counties as well. And I have some ideas which I may be coming to council for support and backing on to encourage more of this development. And last but not least is on immigration. I was very pleased to see at the provincial level that Cornwall was selected as a pilot for a regional immigration pilot. I don't think there's anybody around the table that does not want to grow Cornwall's population, and I think this is certainly a way that we could leverage economic development tools on that. When we have new Canadians arriving in the GTA, the cost of a house, the cost of rent, the cost of living is very expensive. And as I've said, it doesn't set themselves up for long-term success. And I believe when we look at the job opportunities here in the city, I think there's certainly an opportunity to leverage that and to come up with a regional strategy. So I look forward to working on that and the federal counterparts on. And I'll just wrap up by saying with that immigration, as a glass half full, as I speak with different businesses in the city and in our area and in our region, one of the things that I'm hearing very often is actually difficulty finding skilled labor or people to fill jobs. And I actually think the more that we go on, that's actually going to be a pending challenge for economic development. When we have employers that are interested in bringing 200, 300, 400 jobs, if it's in the business park, wherever it may be, making sure there's a pool of workers in our community is going to be key. It's a good problem to have for some parts of the province, and I believe that we have that challenge, but I also believe we have the opportunity with it as well. So in my role, I look forward to working on those issues with you, and happy to entertain any questions or comments council members may have.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner?
This is not unexpected, Eric. You and I have talked about this. This council unanimously voted on bringing a university to Cornwall. The economic value would be between $20 to $40 million. We bring youth back to this city instead of sending them to where they can't afford to school in Toronto. So what I'm asking you on behalf of the council is that you commit to supporting, to bringing the university to Cornwall, either satellite or just a regular.
Thank you, Councillor. I certainly do, and that's something that I think this topic was raised for quite timely for Council during the recent election, and I believe there was support from all candidates to take a look at that. The comment I've made to you and I've made in public is the federal government and the province at this time seem determined, or I wouldn't say completely settled, on the City of Toronto as a location. But I share your comments of where the cost of establishing a new university in downtown Toronto would be astronomically more than it would be in a community like Cornwall. And the, no offense, downtown Toronto is doing quite well, that's a good thing, but the ripple effect and the economic growth and impact it could have on a community like Cornwall, I think would reverberate much more in a community like ours. And when we talk about population, we talk about retention. Having students, if it's from Prescott, Russell, or SDNG, that are francophone, that go away to Ottawa or Toronto, it makes it more difficult to have them return home for various different reasons. So by having more post-secondary, if it's a satellite, if it's a myriad, I think the line I always use is higher water raises all ships. If we can get those types of programs, whatever it may be here in the city, the return on investment. I think the investment itself will be astronomically lower, but the return on investment would help Cornwall much, much more than a larger urban center that has the opportunity to attract development and growth on a bigger scale.
Just one more thing, I've discussed it with NAFCAN, and NAFCAN wants to have a university there, so the bricks and mortar would not be costed to the government. The bricks and mortar will already be there. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Certainly turnkey ready, absolutely.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Elaine McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And it's not really a question. I just want to congratulate you on your position and to tell you that I think we're going to be extremely well served. I served with you on the Housing Committee, so I know very well the kind of drive and commitment you bring to all you do. And I'm sure that you're going to be a very effective minister for us, and I'm glad you're where you are.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else?
Just got promoted.
Yeah.
Mr. Duncan, very good move to keep the staff. They're excellent, and so you're going to be well served by your
you.
office staff. And I want to thank you for coming and speaking to us. We are doing our part in the city. We have a brand new waterfront plan. We have a signed agreement with the Mohawk people of Akwesasne. We're doing all we can, and we want to make sure that we work with you and with our provincial representative to leverage as much as we can for the city of Cornwall. So I'm happy that you are bringing so much energy to this role, and we are going to be speaking often, I suspect.
Thank you. I'd say one quick story as I leave. I'm heading actually to Toronto tonight. The trains aren't running, so I'm driving up tonight, doing a panel tomorrow night with Adam Van Couverden, a new Liberal member from Milton, and Mumalak Kakik, the new NDP MP from Nunavut. Adam came across the floor to the House of Commons. We were chatting on Wednesday, and he said, "How are you finding the job?" I said, "I'm loving it. It's exciting, but it can be quite tiring and daunting." He said, "Yes, I get quite tired too." And I thought, if the gold medal Olympians getting tired, I don't feel so bad after all. So it's been a wonderful company, and I'm enjoying the experience so far. So thank you for the time, and I look forward to working with everybody.
Great.
Thanks for
Merci.
having me tonight. Thank you.
Next presentation, Madam Clerk.
Our first delegation is Placemaking by Kelly Bergeron.
Welcome to Council, Ms. Bergeron.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. I'm just going to pour some water. So I guess I'll start by talking about what placemaking is. And I just really want to thank everyone for sitting here, and you're probably all wondering why I'm talking about placemaking. I'm a techie, and I've lived in a lot of different places, and since I've been here for the past 4 years, I've noticed that we have a lot of opportunity to create vibrancy, and I know that Council approved the Vibrant Communities Plan, and this fits very well into that plan as well. So we want to create spaces for everyone from 8 years old to 80 years old. And sometimes the smallest things we can do for our neighborhoods can have the biggest impact. So adding a little bit of color or an interactive experience can create micro moments in our neighborhoods, and Cornwall has the opportunity to revitalize places in the core and especially in Le Village. We're launching a pilot project called Experience City, and talking about placemaking, it's all about competing with Amazon or online shopping. So it's really interesting to see the online shopping taking over, and it's not just affecting our community, it's affecting the US. And luckily, Canada is always behind the US when it comes to trends. So we can see that malls are closing and downtowns are struggling to survive. But a lot of these places are turning around their downtowns, such as Toronto, where they've shut down King Street to cars, and they have shared bikes, and they have parklets and things like that. So we have an opportunity to reimagine what the city will look like. So we want to bring more people downtown. And if you go to the next slide, the one with Leonard Cohen on it, here's a few examples of great placemaking projects that will make you very happy. And you can see I put Pommier Piano there because I know that that was something that came up in the downtown, and a lot of people don't know, that that's actually a way of placemaking. So it's creating an experience, having people stop in the street and take a moment and enjoy that moment. We also call them sticky streets, so it's making people stay in one place. And the more we create those opportunities, it's better for us economically and for mental health, physical health, because people will be biking more, people will be walking more. So if we go to the benefits, this is a very wordy slide. With a small, modest budget, you can create tiny changes in your neighborhoods. We installed a little free library on Race Street. Thank you to the Towndrows for building it. And so many people use it. It forces people to stop and look. The more foot and bike traffic you create, the more people will slow down and appreciate their surroundings. So I don't know if you know this, but only 4 to 8% of people arrive by car and shop downtown. Most of the revenue that comes in the downtown is from people walking and cycling. Plus, cyclists have more money to spend because they're not paying for a car, but that's just besides the point. So anyway, the point of this presentation is to talk about 2 quick projects that I would love to partner with the city on. We need your help to do this because they're very public and they're in public spaces. So number 1 is painting the crosswalk at Pitt and 2nd, and we would want to activate this the night of the first Art Walk. So when people are downtown and they're gathered for Art Walk, we have people painting. Obviously, we would have to shut down the street. We have people painting, we have volunteers in the street painting, and we're creating that vibrancy, we're creating that sense of community. And it won't cost very much, and we will be fundraising for that. Actually just completed a fundraising grant this evening before I got here. So we're budgeting about $1,500 for this project. And now the next project, while I pour some water here. So the next project is a parklet design build competition. And they do this in Toronto on King Street. They have about 60 parklets in San Francisco, and they actually have a dedicated parklet program. And what it does is we already have the documentation, and I believe the plans to do that in the downtown that was approved a couple years ago, but no one has done it yet. And I'm like, it's expensive. And if we work together with youth to conceptualize it, and we work together with carpenters and builders, we can put together a parklet somewhere hopefully between 2nd and 3rd Street, because we don't have any patios on that street. If you go to downtown Montreal, there are patios everywhere. And this makes people stop and enjoy the neighborhood, and they have something to look at, and I know my dog would love it too. But basically, these are public spaces for people. Colorful, fun, brings people into, not into the street, but into the vision of other people, which will create more crowds and more traffic in the downtown. So these 2 projects, the first one at Pitt and 2nd, I would need permission to use that space and to work with the police to shut down that area while a group of people come together and paint that section. And it's been proven that that actually provides more security, it slows down traffic, and it improves mental health. So creating more color in the downtown. So the next piece would be the parklet. So we were thinking right near Riley's, and I don't know if we would have to ask permission for that parking spot by Riley's, but I know everyone loves Riley's and they love to get their sandwiches, but there's nowhere to sit. And how lovely would that be? And we would invite people in the public to conceptualize and send in their ideas. And so essentially we're budgeting about $15,000 to build this out, because we have to have approved plans and work with the city on what that would look like. So if you go to the next slide, this is always the question that people get: how are you going to fund it? So we've already been contacted about the Bob Turner mural, which is another project that I recently launched. Bob Turner was a good friend of my grandfather and contributed so much to this community. And I thought, you know, if Leonard Cohen can have a mural, so can Bob Turner. And I think it would be so appropriate to have it in the downtown and kind of as a tribute to such a great human being. And so we launched a crowdfunding plan for that piece. And we also are applying for about 8 different grants right now through the Ontario government, through the Canadian government, and so on and so forth. So that's basically what I wanted to talk about asking you for those spaces. Now, how does this tie into our goals? Vibrant communities, you can go to the next slide. We want to address the 4 pillars of vibrant communities. That's through mental health, physical health, poverty, and security. So this would encourage and create group activities, outdoor gatherings, and block parties that give people the opportunity to share a meal and socialize. This would allow us to work with the municipality to create and enhance public infrastructure and green space that supports a healthy community that is friendly for all and includes youth and seniors. We want to create bicycle-friendly and walkable communities for all ages and abilities. We want to create a culture of volunteerism and giving back. And there's a lot of other points with vibrant communities that this fits into. But more interestingly is, I'm going to my next slide. So we have a huge tie-in to the waterfront plan because we can pilot these projects and demonstrate how small changes can lead to economic opportunities and vibrancy. So a good example of this is collecting data before we do the activations to see how much people are spending downtown or have just a gauge of what that percentage looks like before and after. We would also look at the data that comes from the police where accidents happen and what was the other one? Crime. So we were looking at the data mapping for that as well, and we would like to address those issues. And I think with Le Village, we would have a huge opportunity because there's just so much opportunity in that space because there's not too much going on. So through the waterfront plan, we want to enhance visual and physical connections, create spaces to celebrate and enjoy, promote multi-generational enjoyment, and we definitely want to collaborate with the Mohawk Council of Akwesasne to recognize and promote Indigenous culture. So again, we would collaborate with MCA and the residents through, the art projects and the RFPs and just working together on creating those vibrant spaces. So we want to provide unique experiences and create anchors to draw people in, which is all on the waterfront plan. I'm sorry I plagiarized it, but it was really easy. So if you go to the next slide. Next slide. There's a lot of waterfront plan. So we see opportunities with the public front of the library. It still remains empty, but you can do so much with that space. You don't have to build too much, but you could even do something as simple as, a bocce ball court, or you can have a pop-up coffee shop or some seating in the front of the library. I just feel like it's such a wasted space, and the library should be bringing people in and engaging them from the outside as well. And so at the end of the day, we're going to invite the public to kind of give us ideas. They're going to pitch ideas to us through an online form or through social media, and then we're going to vote on those ideas, and we're going to raise money to do them. We already have a service club that has reached out to us and is interested in potentially sponsoring the mural. So we have these opportunities already in front of us. And I know I have the Lit Up Cornwall sign, and I know that did not pass, but there's other ways to get around that, and that would be another project that we would happily take on and fundraise for. So our goal right now is to fundraise approximately $30,000 to fund 3 projects. We want to launch our own space eventually, and this would take some time and be a bigger investment, but through that we would do workshops on urban design and how people can get active in their community. We want to kind of demonstrate that there's so much potential. And plus, a lot of young people love to go and see art and walk around cities like Montreal and see things lit up, and how great would that be here? So the key for us is engaging the community as much as possible to raise awareness and empower our citizens to make these tiny changes. And this is what we're looking at for a timeline for the next couple months. So we're gonna bootstrap, we're going to start implementing in the spring, and then we're going to celebrate, and then we're going to ask the community what else they wanna do and who else wants to give us some space to do our thing on. So, yeah, that's about it. Famous urban designer Jane Jacobs. And yeah, I just really look forward to using our imagination to see what we can come up with. So thank you, and you can reach out to me, my email's there. And I just really appreciate your time and patience tonight.
Any questions, comments? Councillor McDonald.
Well, actually, my question is to you, and Madam Mayor, possibly to the CAO through you, and that would be, would it be appropriate for us to take those first two ideas and ask administration to come back with a report so that we can get that happening in time for the first Art Walk? Because I know plans are underfoot already for Art Walk.
Madam CAO?
Through you, Madam Mayor, so yes, council could refer the matter to administration for a report.
Then I'd like to make that motion.
Moved by Councillor McDonald, seconded by Councillor Bergeron. Any further discussion? Questions? Yes, Councillor Gardner.
Just a comment through you, as soon as I saw Leonard Cohen, my gosh,
That was
it
it.
right to mind right away. Also, your discussions about what you want to do. If you take a trip down Three Rivers, in the middle of the city of Three Rivers in the summer, the place is packed with all kinds of pop-up and colorful and everything. It's wonderful down there.
Yep.
So, great idea.
Councillor Bergeron.
Thank you, Kelly, no relation. It's important to make that distinction. I fully support this. This is exactly what I want to see from engaged citizens coming towards us. I want to be really clear that these are the types of things I would love to see in the budget. These are the types of things that I think make a huge difference, and I fully support everything you're doing here. So thank you for bringing it forward.
Thank you.
I do have one question, sorry, I
Yeah.
don't mean to be Columbo there. You mentioned the percentage of people who come by car, is that Cornwall specific or just a general?
It's a general statistic. So I've been following a lot of urban designers very closely over the past few years, and I'm not gonna lie, I kind of obsess over it, and it's a very strange thing. I'm trying to get a dog park too, but we'll talk about that later. But yeah, I've been looking at a lot of data, and the data that came out of, and people will say, oh, that's Toronto, that's whatever. Toronto's made up of little neighborhoods that resemble what we have here, Roncesvalles, Parkdale, whatever. And, you know, Bloor Street created a separated bike lane, which is one of the busiest streets in Toronto, and the data that came out of that was fantastic. More people were spending money in the stores. The amount of people that arrive by car is so small compared to how many people are walking and cycling. And the more people that cycle, you'll get more people on their bikes. And how good is that for our hospitals and our health and our mental health and everything? So yeah, I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to the data stuff, but I really think that if you wanted more data, you've seen my emails, so yeah. Sid, I'm looking at you.
So
Yeah.
note to self, add more Leonard Cohen to your documents, but
Oh yeah,
I
I
have-
contacted that artist who did that, and he gave me a quote, and someone's already reached out to me from Florida who's interested to put a quote together as well.
thank you. I just want to point out a dog park I fully support too, which is a great idea, so please bring it forward. But I don't think we dismissed the idea of a Cornwall sign. I just
Nope.
don't think it was ever a motion to add to our budget, and so
It
it's
was
the
not
type of thing
dismissed.
that
Type of thing we could raise
yeah.
money for.
I don't think there's an issue with bringing that forward. It wasn't dismissed is the point I want to make, so.
It just didn't take off.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it just wasn't a motion.
Didn't take off.
It
Well,
wasn't-
there's other options as well.
Right,
So-
and not everything has to be done by motion. Sometimes it just has to be
It just
a
has to be
will.
done. You wake up in
Just
the
has to
morning,
be
it's
done.
there.
Councillor Grant and then Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We didn't dismiss it, but we put together, looking at strategy for lighting in the community. So it isn't, and that was part of the strategy, so
Mhm.
it was just one little element, so we're swimming in the same direction here on this one,
Yeah, wait till you see the next presentation.
all right?
Yeah. Counselor Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you. Thanks for this presentation,
Thank you,
Kelly.
Mr. Bennett.
I like the idea that we're trying to make our town fun. So I've visited some cities. Quebec City comes to mind, where you had the picture of all the umbrellas. I'm not sure where that was, but in Quebec City they had the same idea, and you keep finding yourself going back to that spot.
Mhm.
I don't even realize why, but you're back at that spot. So
Mhm.
it's a fun atmosphere. It brings people to an area, and I love that idea. The painted sidewalks, that's a really cool idea. The picture of the guy doing hopscotch going across. There's so many different things you can do with those things. Brightens up the area, and again, makes it a more fun spot to be. Your lit up Cornwall sign. I think there are some partnerships to be had there.
Mhm.
I have spoken to a local guy who runs the shop class for a local high school, and they were years ago built the skateboard park.
Mhm.
He said this is easily done. So it's a matter of getting a group of people together. It's a high school, so they're not buying all the wood, so somebody's got to supply the stuff. But the guy's by trade, he's a carpenter, so he's not going to do a shoddy job.
Yeah.
And to Glenn's point, we're looking at lighting up our park in different ways, and spotlights is one of those ways. So the sign itself doesn't necessarily have to glow,
Mhm.
but to have something shining on it to make it glow there at night, and that's the kind of thing you want your visitors to take pictures of when you're in town. Take a picture beside the Cornwall sign. It goes on their Facebook, it goes on their Twitter, and that gets the name out. And some people will just go, hey, it looks pretty cool. Cornwall, what's Cornwall? Where's Cornwall? So anything that gets our eyeballs on the city, I love. I like everything you want to do here, and I think Councilor Bergeron said it best. This is exactly the kind of thing we need. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Ms. Bergeron, thank you. Wait. Sticky streets.
Yeah.
I like that. So Kelly Bergeron is fierce on Twitter, so if you do any Twitter, you can go on there. There are a lot of discussions that she has on there around designers, but really, it's all about the fact that you love it here.
Mhm.
So this is all from a place of love. We can feel that and sense that, and I'm looking forward to all of the energy that this is going to spark. So, merci beaucoup. Thank you.
Merci, Madame.
I'm going to ask for a vote on the motion to refer this for a report. All in favor? Carried.
Our second delegation is a beautification project, and here this evening are Etienne Saint-Aubin and Dig Aubry.
Welcome to council, Monsieur Saint-Aubin and Mr. Aubry.
It's indeed a great privilege to have the opportunity to speak with you this evening about the future of our community, and to be here with my colleague, former Mayor Dick Aubry. We both share a profound and long-standing affection for and commitment to the future of Cornwall. And I'm particularly thrilled this evening that we are part of an evening where you've heard from the energized youth of our community. Old men too have dreams.
Yourself.
We are delighted to have the opportunity to contribute to this movement. And actually presenting to City Council is not a privilege that I take lightly. As a governing body, I've always felt that you are part of a significant tradition of democracy. You are not merely a committee or an advisory board. You are the political masters and decision makers with exactly the same authority as the legislature and cabinet of our province, which I had the privilege of working for, and the authority of Parliament and Cabinet within the realm of the jurisdiction which is so crucial to the quality of our lives and our well-being. Speaking of beautification, and you have the benefit of our presentation before you, so I'm not going to go through this as though I were a teacher in a classroom. This is not my role this evening. My role is perhaps to ask you to look at this and, in a sense, to look up. Speaking of dreams and hopes, making them come true for the betterment of our community, you're going to have to forgive this Disney buff for summoning to mind the words of the Lion King as a call to leadership. Remember who you are. And in your decision-making about the matter of beautification, please remember that this involves making our community more attractive to investment, to new residents, but most importantly of all, to ourselves. When you look good, you feel good, and you do good is more than just a saying. It's rooted in reality, as we probably all know. None of this will happen spontaneously by itself, and not everything can be done on the same time frame. But let us begin, and equally importantly, let us continue. I'm old enough to remember President Kennedy's call for his country to make the daring commitment to reach for the moon. And he justified that in these terms. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we are willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one which we intend to win. Unless we organize and measure the best of our energies and skills, the former vast Domtar and Courtaulds industrial wastelands will remain largely empty blights in our community forever. And some of us are not ready to wait forever. And without the best of our energy and skills, many neighborhoods, primarily comprised of absentee landlord rental housing, will remain unsightly, untreed, as well as unsafe. And there are sources of innovative funding to be tapped. And that too requires community resources to be assembled. It is a great deal of work, and sorry for this walk down memory lane, but I can't help but think of the Ed Sullivan Show with the guys that would juggle stuff, balls, and so on. I guess we're presenting you with more things to juggle. We recognize that you have a lot to deal with. But that doesn't take away from the fact that these things are important. We're proposing does not require reaching for the moon, but it will require looking up to the future. I'm reminded of when I was a small little boy, I hoped to be tall one day. I guess much like Cornwall hopes to achieve over 50,000. My mother told me that I should keep stretching as part of attaining that goal. I guess we are urging you to follow that same advice, to never stop stretching, to keep reaching for what might seem difficult to achieve, inspiring us all to be proud of ourselves. And about that stretching advice from my mom, it may not have helped, but it sure didn't hurt. And so I'm turning now to my colleague, Mr. Aubry, who will speak of goals which are attainable earlier. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Your Worship, council members and administration, it's always a pleasure for me to be here in this room. A few memories. Etienne has been very aspirational and inspirational in what he's suggested to you, and I trust that could be the framework for perhaps a long-term goal, long-term objective.
So while he's been aspirational, I'm going to be a little more remedial and get down to what I consider is some low-hanging fruit in terms of trying to make our community a more beautiful place. Manon, are you working the slides for me? Before we hit the first slide, let me start off by saying I think this city has done a very, very good job over the last number of years in planting new trees. However, first slide, please. That won't be it. Yeah. There's some pictures of some trees here.
Through you, Madam Mayor, this is the document that I have.
Okay. There's no slide with trees, Mr. Aubry.
First one, I think.
The first one?
No, no.
That was a garden.
Do we have the right presentation?
Yeah, it was emailed to me just before.
I coordinated this all with Diane Brown over a week ago. Everything was all tickety-boo in line, eh?
My apologies, I've had no contact with Diane about photos.
Well,
So through you, Madam Mayor,
Yes.
Mr. Aubry came into City Hall a little over a week ago, and he brought in some photos of some trees within the municipality. So I don't believe that we'll be able to get those pictures brought up for this particular presentation, but we can certainly circulate them to council. The trees had, I think, to help
I can kind of describe it.
Yeah, to help Mr. Aubry, we had trees that were perhaps on our boulevards. So Mr. Aubry talked about the number of trees that the city has planted and replaced. But then for some of these trees, you know, you would see some shrubbery in that would be growing up around the base of the tree, and certain efforts that would be taken to potentially clean that up, hopefully make the tree, I think, a little bit more healthy. And also, I think you were kind of looking at certain areas where we could, you know, potentially increase the number of trees that we're planting.
Yeah, basically what I wanted to show you, after complimenting you and the city and historically the good job that we've done, is we actually do a very lousy job after the tree has been planted. And I wanted to show you, and you can see those things for yourselves if you haven't seen them already. One or two of you I've actually taken on a little tour. But if you start down at Water Street near Brookdale Avenue, you'll see trees with suckers coming out of the bottom. These trees are only 3 or 4 years old. They're lovely trees, but they don't look like a tree anymore. They look like some kind of a hybrid bush. Moving further down, my second slide was right in front of the RCAF wing. Beautiful, beautiful tree. No leaves on it, because all the leaves are in the suckers that are coming out from down below. Then I took a little trip down Bergeron Lane toward Point Maling, and you're not responsible for it, it just bears your family name on Bergeron Lane. There's some of these big, gorgeous trees. And what do you have coming out of the bottom of them there? You have these suckers, and they're at least the size of 2 fingers and taller than I am. Just gorgeous trees that, frankly, don't look very good. Well, they look scruffy, right? And if you ever get close to the corner of McConnell and 2nd Street on the southeast corner, it's right near the bus stop. You've got one really great example of a lack of care. And I can take you up onto 9th Street and so on. I'll take you a little further up on the top end of Brookdale, where the trees there are, what, 15, 20 years old? Lovely, lovely maple trees. They need some care. They got this stuff coming out of the bottom. Okay, so there's a good kind of a to-do thing, I hope, to suggest to you, whether that be incorporated in your normal maintenance, but I think you've got to give some priority to that. I mean, people look at that and they say, do these people not care? Okay, I think I've kind of made that point. I'm going to go down Brookdale Avenue now to the traffic circle. And of course, we have this lovely new boulevard all the way from the traffic circle right down to the bridge. And I gather the federal government had quite a bit to do with that, probably through the Bridge Authority, I'm not sure. But this was all completed, what, a year and a half ago or so? And they planted trees. They actually planted around 210 trees. I counted them. And you also have this problem here, too. It's only a year and a half old, but you've got suckers coming out of the bottom. But you also have 15 to 20% of those trees are dead. And I did this monitoring at the end of the year, so I was pretty sure, in September. Now, I understand that the government of Canada probably, when they did that, through one of its agencies or whatever, they probably sublet the contract for the trees. And surely there's got to be a guarantee there. And if you keep waiting too long, the guarantee's going to expire, and guess who's going to have to foot the bill to replace those 20 or 25 trees? Okay, I'll move along here. I think one of the things that the community's done really well, and I really like the program, and I know Councillor Hebert has something to do with it, is the Adopt a Street program. This is a really good program. I think it's too low profile. I think you could do a heck of a lot better with that by raising the profile, getting more people involved, and putting some publicity and so on behind it. It doesn't have to be a lot of money, so it can be a winner by getting the community involved and feeling ownership of their street and so on. Second last item. I think there's been, and there has been for some time, a problem with garbage and blue boxes. And the problem arises when garbage day is on Wednesday and people put it out on Monday. And guess what happens when it gets windy? And guess what happens when critters and dogs and cats and so on, and snow plows come by? What you got is a mess. I humbly suggest that perhaps there are ways in which you can tighten that up. And it might involve a little tap on the arm, but it's a small kind of reminder, or perhaps down the road for a second or a third offense, even a fine. But it's something you should think about. And again, I consider this the low-hanging fruit, not the real expensive things that Etchance talked about. The final item I have, and thanks for your patience, Your Worship and Council. The government of Canada, the Prime Minister during the last election campaign, do you remember that he promised, and I think it's a program, that it would plant 2 billion trees in this country in the next 10 years? I remember that. That's only 200 million a year. 200 million a year, you know what our share is of that? 4,347 trees every year. And I would suggest to you that somehow somebody be given the responsibility to make sure that we follow up, that we get our share. If they have a program that's put in place, that we have, as a community, a big say in where they go and how they're done, and so on and so forth. I think all of those things put together can give us a fairly good start on the beautification that my colleague and I would like to see more of in this community, and I think the citizens would be indeed behind it. Thank you very much.
Any questions, comments? Yes, Councillor Grant and then Councillor Bergeron.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Declare our plans. We've got, we're going to be doing a tree canopy and led by Councillor Hebert.
Good.
And it's aggressive. And what we need help with is also that people don't cut down trees that currently exist. We do have we have 2,500 people working in the Adopt a Street program.
Excellent, excellent.
And they're all volunteers. There's no paid help in this.
Yes.
And we're working with them.
Are all the streets covered?
I don't know, not that, but I deal with the people that have started this. I have meet with them on a
Wonderful.
regular basis, and that program is working well. If you go up to the traffic circle, there's a man there every day picking up litter going toward. So that program is working. If anybody else wants to volunteer, I'm sure there's room for them. So we do have plans for that. So I think, and those trees along Brookdale have already been, our administration are aware of them, and there's actions being placed to take care of those trees that are dead, because you're right, they look ugly and they're terrible. So there, we do have plans to move forward with them. The suckers, I don't know anything about them, so.
Your Worship, I was here a few weeks ago when there was that beautiful presentation on the tree canopy, and I guess that's what you're referring to. It's all part of the big piece, isn't it? Eh? Thank you.
Yes, and then Councillor Bergeron.
Thank you, Monsieur Saint-Aubin. Merci pour votre présentation. J'aimerais remercier qu'on parle de l'embellissement de notre ville. And I'll translate in English after, but c'est le type de mouvement que j'aimerais voir dans notre processus budgétaire. C'est exactement en ce que je crois. So thank you, former Mayor Aubry, for coming and making this presentation. This is exactly the kind of thing I want to see, a budget time that has an impact on our city. I think the beautification of our city is not really up for debate. I think it's about how we prioritize what we're doing here. And the previous presentation was also an example of that. And I think I see some overlap there.
Yep.
So as far as I'm concerned, if motions came forward to support the beautification of our city, these are priorities for me, and I would be willing to see other things in our budget removed to move these forward. So thank you for the presentation.
Any other comment? So I want to thank you both for presenting to us. I think, Councillor Grant, I appreciate your comments on the tree. 2020 is going to be the year of the tree here in Cornwall. We're going to be talking about trees. And Adopt a Street is coming to City Hall next week, I think, to continue to talk about the program and push around that program. I just want to thank you and everybody in this room, because the reason you're here is because you care about where you live. If you didn't care, you wouldn't be here. So, thank you all for being here, and thank you for being so eloquent and coming to spark our imagination around beautification. Alors, merci beaucoup.
Madam Mayor, without prolonging things, you will note actually at the bottom of the screen,
Yes.
we had hoped that council might request report with the input of staff on the documentation which was put forward this evening
Mm-hmm.
in order to develop an implementation plan with appropriate community consultation and investment support.
Merci. Councillor Dupel.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would put forward that motion if I have a seconder to have administration prepare a report for us.
Councillor Bergeron?
Second that motion.
Second, okay. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor? Carried. Merci. Thank you.
Our
Madam
last
Clerk.
delegation is the one that we've added to the agenda about surrounding the open air fire. And we have Mr. Terry Muir and Rodney Rivette.
Welcome to council, Mr. Muir, Mr. Rivette.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to say thank you for letting us speak tonight at the council meeting. Respectfully, we're humbled to be here. Thank you very much.
Of course, go ahead.
We'd just like to say thank you to Fire Chief Wazin for the great meetings we've had with him over the last few months. We may be on the different side of the table, but they were done respectfully, and I think we had some great meetings, so I'd like to thank him. So I'm going to turn things over to Terry to start the meeting off to talk a little bit about language.
The number one thing we want to address is the common thing that people seem to refer to as bonfires within the city. And we're not promoting that whatsoever. We're promoting something that's respectful to as many people as can be, is a small fire with clean, dry wood, and if burnt properly, emits very little smoke. So it doesn't have the implications where neighbors are having breathing issues and smoke coming in and not allowing them to enjoy their property by allowing somebody else to enjoy their property. So, you know, that's the first thing we'd like to clarify. And some of the points that we brought up in our presentation is
that we've tried to do some research in a lot of communities, as, you know, similar size, larger sizes and stuff. And from the communities that we did research, and we weren't selective, we just picked them at random, we were unable to find any place that outright disallows any type of burning whatsoever. But there are certainly areas where people can, you know, it has to be realistic. I mean, it has to be respectful. It can't be unsafe. It can't be somebody throwing the pallets on top of the fire. It can't, you know, I mean, unfortunately, common sense doesn't prevail in a lot of these cases. And my understanding of the issue, especially after talking to Fire Chief Wazine, was that the bylaw that existed was essentially unenforceable because nobody respected it whatsoever, and there was no bylaw available after hours to do anything about it. So to that, nobody was buying permits because what was the outcome of not having one?
I guess let's talk about the white elephant in the room, which is the health issues. Do we agree that people have health issues? Absolutely. And should they be respected? Absolutely. There's, in Woodstock, Ontario, they have what's called a fire ban relief form. So if your neighbor has a fire permit, you can go there and you can say, look, I have COPD. Here's my doctor's note that says I have COPD, and you will have relief from the fire in your neighbor's backyard. And I think what we need to do is we need to have compromise. I don't think an all-out ban is necessarily good for everyone, because obviously your numbers show, as our numbers show, that the majority of people who partook in this debate overwhelmingly would like to have fires in Cornwall. So I guess addressing the health issue is the most important thing, because I think that's the stickler here. I think that's what Councillor McDonald is most concerned about, and you have every right to be, and so are we. So I think if we have this compromise and we put this into as part of a new bylaw, we've addressed that situation, we've addressed the concerns, and I think that's what's important.
And the other thing that we come up with, that we found in other locations, is where people can text in or call in that they're having a fire, thereby preventing, you know, if there is a call saying, oh, I smell smoke, there's no need to roll fire trucks out, because they've already been notified ahead of time that there's a fire on that premise, a legal fire, and if it's illegal, well then, you know, they should suffer the consequences. There's no reason to be having bonfires in a backyard, especially when it's within 30 feet of another, something that can burn or whatever. I mean, we're in support of anything that's dangerous or hazardous, you know, being banned. But I don't think, at a time when we're trying to recruit more families to come to this area, and younger families and everything else, I mean, I would hazard a guess that almost everybody in this room has at some point sat by a small fire, big fire, whatever it was, with their children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews, or whatever, and roasted a marshmallow or cooked a hot dog. And it's very important family time together. And it gives you the opportunity to enjoy your home, your property, without having to be gone all the time, sitting on a phone, or, you know, playing a game on the TV or whatever, you know. I think there's a compromise available here.
And also, I think it's important that if you do reconsider having fires in Cornwall, that you put together a bylaw that can be enforced and has stiff penalties for people who break the bylaw. That's what's important here. There are other bylaws in our community that we don't enforce because they're complaint driven. You know, and what's the difference? There's no difference in one bylaw to the next. As long as we address the health issue, I think that's the most important thing that's on most people's mind around this table. I don't think it's a safety issue. Chief Wazin said it wasn't a safety issue. It was a nuisance. That was the problem. It was the nuisance. And if you take away the health nuisance, to me, the smell is not a health is not a health issue, right? If you have a legitimate health concern, that should be addressed. It shouldn't be looked past. We need to address those issues. And I think Woodstock, Ontario has a fantastic bylaw in place where they're using this process, and it seems to be working for them. So why don't we look at something like that? I think we just need to have options on the table, and that's why we're here, is to present our options. And your data that you've collected shows that 5 times plus more people want fires here than don't. And we're asking you to take that into consideration, as well as trying to address the health issue.
Therefore, we respectfully ask that you turn down the request for a full ban and consider a bylaw that can be put together with some options that protect everybody equally and will make the majority of people happy, and also allow for provision where if somebody has a real problem, I'm not talking about where one neighbor doesn't like another neighbor, because we all know that happens frequently. So they call bylaw, they call police, whatever on them. But we're talking about a legitimate system in place where if somebody has a health issue, then, sorry, that there has to be an exemption for that area, that immediate area. So that's all we're asking.
So we're just looking to have a bylaw that's fair, respectful, and safe for everybody in our community. And that's it. We didn't want to take up all your time tonight. That's all we wanted to tell you. We would like to address these concerns, and we thank you for your time. Oh, we'd also like to present you with our petition with close to 2,000 signatures on it.
Will you take questions from council?
Absolutely.
If there are any questions from council? Councillor McIntosh.
I'm going to reserve most of my comments for the big debate coming up, but obviously, I've done some research on this too. Some of the top doctors and scientists would disagree with you on smoke, just smoke, okay? And that's where I'm taking mine from, not junk science. So I'll debate that. You talk about if we don't allow open burn fires, discourage people from coming here. You know how fast Brantford has grown in the last 10 years? They've gone from about 40,000 to 124,000. I see here they don't allow outdoor fires. Several others here too. They've outgrown us and they have bans. So that doesn't really explain where you're coming from with this tied in with economic growth. It just doesn't happen. Anyway, I'll reserve most of my other comments today.
Well, if that was a question, I'd like to answer that. I think we offer what other cities can't. We have kind of a big city feel, but it is a small city. And we can do things like this because it's safe. It's been deemed safe by our fire official, our chief fire official. There have been out of all the complaints, there have been no charges laid to anyone for fire safety. There have been no charges laid, as far as I know, about anything. So
I couldn't agree with you more.
The safety issue is not, safety is an issue.
We're not going to argue that way. We're going to pass through the chair.
Yeah, sorry, and that's, if I
Please.
can finish it, thank you.
Go ahead.
And I think that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to keep that feel. We've had fire since the dawn of time, and we're all still here. You can't argue that science. We started cooking fires when there was cavemen here. So you can't, there's science to debate everywhere.
And if I may?
Mr. Muir?
On the issue of the smoke, there's many definitions of what smoke is. I mean, firefighters walk into a building with acrid smoke in there, which is deadly. So, I mean, there is absolutely no debate that certain types of smoke will kill you. What we're offering is that people be taught what clean dry firewood is. Because it's definitely a misconception of what that is. And if you burn clean, cured, dry hardwood, the smoke will be almost non-existent. So, to argue that it's deadly, if you stand over top of anything, whether it be a propane fire, a natural gas fire, anything, it can be deadly. But there are provisions that can make it relatively safe.
Councillor McIntosh?
I'm just basing my comments on doctors and scientists, okay? I don't know what doctors and scientists papers you're quoting from, but they're saying, hey, it's a problem. And
If you read the report, it's in there.
and this idea of somebody having to go to the doctor to get a certificate so their neighbor can't burn. Why should I be the one if I've got COPD? Why should the onus be on me to go get it? And doctors don't give you these. Most of them have a charge. Anyway, I'll save my comments for later.
Thank you. I have Councillor McDonald and then Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So through you, I'd like to ask a question. It repeatedly, you used the phrase legitimate health issue. I don't know.
Well,
where the
COPD is a
dividing
legitimate
line is.
legitimate health issue.
Well,
That's the legitimate
I'm
would
looking
be.
at a document produced by the Eastern Ontario Health Unit about the harmful effects of breathing wood smoke. And it's not just if you have emphysema or you've got lung cancer. If a normal, healthy person breathes in smoke from burning wood, it is harmful to their health, more so than simply breathing in smoke from a natural gas smoke. Not that anybody's going to stand over and breathe it in. But if you're in a yard and wood is being burned, then if you're breathing in something that's harmful. So why insist on it? I mean, you can have the same emotional charge from a fire that's fueled by natural gas. Thank you.
But there are emissions from natural gas fires. That's why you have your emissions detector in your home, so that if you have too much, it's dangerous as well. So too much of anything is dangerous. You can say that about anything.
And our number one reason for including that was the fact that when we spoke to Fire Chief Rosine about the calls that were called in previously, a lot of them were nuisance complaints where people are calling in saying that, oh, my neighbor's burning again, my neighbor's burning again. There's a lot of times, and we all know this, that neighbors just don't like each other. And so therefore it taxes the organization that's called, whether it's fire, whether it's police, whatever it is. So I mean, there's several instances where you can't.
Well, with all due respect though, Terry, I've heard from so many people who just want to keep peace in the neighborhood, and so they suffer in silence. And they appeal to us, not in an open forum, but they call us or they let us know that they're relieved that this is coming in because they've suffered for years. And not everybody wants to have to fight for the right to breathe freely.
Councillor Grant?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That's basically the point I was going to make. The phone calls I got from residents who thanked me profusely before putting a ban on these fires, because for that reason, they don't want to fight with their neighbor. And these people are not, it's not just elderly people, it's young people that have respiratory problems too. And if I can prevent one person from suffering from the smoke from fires, then I'll vote against a ban every time. And that's what I'll do, because I listen to these people cry, and when they're talking to me about this. So one person suffering is enough for me to say no way for a fire in this community. And you can talk about all the stats you want. Think about people first.
Any other comments or questions from council? Councillor Gardner.
Just a few. I mean, we had, what, 500 people that had no permits? A little over 500 people, no permits. I've had people call me that have to close their windows in one home in particular where there are 3 people around there that were burning wood, some of it natural wood, some of it wood with paint on it, some of them burning garbage. That has to stop. And at the end of the day, when I look at reports from doctors like Councillor McIntosh, that trumps everything else. I want to see people safe and people healthy. That's why I passed the smoking bylaw, because people were getting hurt by that. I had to fight for that, and I'm going to fight for this too.
Did you want to respond, Mr.
Yeah,
Levin?
that'd be great. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say that, and I believe Fire Chief Wazine would know some of these stats. The number of people that were burning illegally were not burning as we proposed. You know, that is the number one issue. You can't burn leaves in your backyard or painted wood or treated wood or something like that without having problems. And you can't burn in certain areas. There's just no way it can happen. But I would like to think that if you pass the bylaw, everybody's going to abide by it, but the same people that were doing it previously are going to continue burning. And if you have a bylaw that's not being enforced now at 5 o'clock, who's going to enforce the new bylaw? So can we not work on something that's respectful?
I'll save the rest of my argument for the debate. I've done my research. I went online on top of what I already have here, the number of cities that have an all-out ban, and I agree with what they're doing here.
Any other comments?
Just a quick one before,
Oh.
oh, sorry, Eric, go.
No. Councillor Bergeron and then Councillor Bennett.
Just a quick question. You said
Point of
you
order, Madam Mayor.
Oh.
Do we not normally stand when we address the chair?
Councillor Bergeron.
Fair point. You mentioned that there's 2,000 signatures on the petition. Are those signatures from people from within the city of Cornwall?
Yes. And they're all of age majority as well.
Has it been submitted to the clerk?
I know we plan on doing that, and we have it now
Part
for
of
you.
this presentation is a 2,000-page signatured petition. Can you read what the petition says, please?
Sure.
Absolutely.
I could take longer the presentation.
Okay, petition for repeal of the open air bylaw proposed for the city of Cornwall. It was dated September 13th, 2019, to the mayor and the members of Cornwall City Council. Dear council members, at the regular meeting of council on September 9th, 2019, a motion was passed to draft a bylaw to ban open air burning within city limits and repeal bylaw 2014-063. We understand that the justification of this motion was based on 60 complaints that have been made in regards to the smell and smoke generated by open air fires. There have been opinions that it is a health-related issue and also a cost borne to the city in regards to the fire department dispatching members to investigate these complaints. Bylaw 2014-063 permitted Cornwall residents to conduct small open-air fires in an approved burning appliance on their property, subject to conditions. Residents were required to complete an application form and submit it with $100 to Cornwall Fire Department to obtain a permit which was valid for 3 years. There were restrictions on the permit which included a ban when a complete ban was on open-air burning. It was issued by the chief fire official. A ban on open-air burning during smog alerts, and a very defined restriction on the types of wood that could be burned. It also included restrictions on leaving a fire unattended, the size of fire permitted, location of fires, distance from vegetation, along with other restrictions. The result of disobeying these regulations was a potential fine of $195 for first-time offenders and potentially a cost recovery of $410 an hour for repeat offenders. We feel that council fails to consider the majority of residents when considering this bylaw. We feel that the majority of people who followed the rules and obtained an open-air burn permit used approved devices and did so with caution and care as to not present a danger or to knowingly cause discomfort to any surrounding neighbor. We feel there was a mechanism in place with bylaw 2014-063 that, if applied correctly, would have eliminated the issue of irresponsible open-air fires, but that the fire department failed to take corrective action to prevent anyone in contravention bylaw 2014-63 and has chosen instead to remove the enjoyment for the law-abiding citizens that have purchased permits. We feel that there will be a larger cost to the city of Cornwall in enforcing the new bylaw than there was in enforcing bylaw 2014-063, and the city will lose the revenue generated by the issue of open-air permits. We feel there is a compromise in regards to this bylaw in which will allow the majority of residents to enjoy the property while respecting other neighbors with a legitimate complaint. These permits can be canceled or temporarily suspended during disputes or in regards to infractions. We feel that the body of bylaw 2014-063 provided sufficient protection if the restrictions contained therein were adhered to and administered by the chief fire official. Offenders caught without a permit should be advised the permit is required and be on record as having fire ban until said permit is acquired. Repeat offenders should be fined according to the text of the document. We feel that at a time when councils tend to find ways to attract people to Cornwall proper, this is not time to put bans in place that exist in large centers such as Toronto, Ottawa. We pride ourselves in offering what large centers cannot: affordable housing, low crime rates, and freedoms you cannot find in large centers. With all due respect, we therefore request that council rescind the new open-air burn bylaw, and reinstate bylaw 2014-063 or an equivalent bylaw that will allow the enjoyment of humankind's basic enjoyment of fire, which sees families gather around it and roast marshmallows or hot dogs, etc., and spend quality time together, since campfires have existed for reportedly thousands of years. We ask that you allow families to continue to enjoy their property and make Cornwall more attractive to families than some of the cities referenced, such as Toronto, Montreal, and Ottawa, in the original council request. Signed by the residents of Cornwall.
Thank you. That may be the longest petition.
You asked.
I knew it was long. I didn't know it was that long. So if I can summarize, we disagree with the ban. We think there's a better motion. We think there's a better way forward, and the current bylaw actually had some pretty good rules in it. I don't mean to summarize all of what you said in those 3 sentences, but does that encapsulate what the petition is?
Yeah, so pretty well takes it in.
Thank you.
Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I've had a few conversations with Mr. Rivette that got a little bit heated on occasion, but they were good conversations just the same. So usually what they boiled down to was, there's one phrase that troubles me a little bit, and it's the, I have a right to enjoy my property. Well, my problem with that statement is that your right to enjoy that property may be causing somebody else not to be able to enjoy their property. So we've got, so the nuisance issues, right? When I voted originally in September the way I did, it was because I spoke to a lot of people, and I mean a lot of people that had the nuisance issues and or health issues. And we can't just, can't brush that off because these are legitimate issues. And so I'm kind of exposed in my day job to people, so you can imagine when that hot button issue went, I got a lot of visits. But just as many people were happy with the ban as were opposed to it, right? So, and they always pointed to those 2 things, the nuisance issue and the health issue. The Woodstock bylaw I've read, and in theory, looks like a good one. However, from what I understand, the fire chief up there would rather he didn't have to deal with that. Apparently it's very problematic. So there's something we'd have to look at to see if there's a better way to do what they're doing. I think they're on kind of right track, but if it's difficult to manage, then it's just going to lead us back here. So all this to say that if I was to be presented with a bylaw that I knew for sure was going to protect people from nuisance fires and people with health issues from having to suffer through it, and people do, and it's not something we should be scoffing at. So I would be very open to having that conversation, perhaps even writing up a bylaw to see what it looks like, and then at that time debating whether a new bylaw, in our opinion, will do what we need to do as far as seeking out to protect the people of our city that don't want to be covered with these fires, or the option that was presented to us in September, it may be the right one. But I think to have that conversation completely, I would like to see a much more stricter bylaw written for us to at least debate. Maybe it still doesn't work for us, but I don't know why that should stop us from at least looking at it. So like, I mean, I'm talking about getting down and dirty with this kind of thing. So wind speeds, smog alerts. Smog alerts in particular, as a conversation I had earlier, was worried about that keeps the smoke low, which creates a problem, right? The size of the space between structures, I think, should be bigger. I believe we should be looking at things as like making sure the 45 centimeter by 45 centimeter pit is what the rule is. So I had a lot of friends berate me pretty good because they just built this great big $2,000 stone structure in their backyard, and they're mad at me because they didn't get a permit, and they're mad at me because they didn't follow the rules in place. But that was my problem. So I think with the conversation we're having, it's getting a lot of publicity. So if we were to lean towards a stricter bylaw and allowing fires, I would hope nobody ever calls me and complains that they got a $500 fine for not following the bylaws, because there's no way you don't know at this time.
No.
So I'd be open to hearing it, and it would have to be very convincing for me to change my vote, but at least I'm open to hear it. Thank you.
Madam Mayor?
Yes,
If I
Mr.
could- If I
Rivette?
could just add something to that. In our presentation, we really, we emphasized that we're looking for the 18-inch, 45 centimeter. We're not looking for a bonfire in the backyard. That's just not proper. We're asking for a small, little, safety-approved appliance with a grate on the top, 2 pieces of wood in it. It's not, we're not asking for bonfires in the backyard because that's wrong.
No.
This is not what we're asking for, and this is where the language gets all skewed. So we need to look at that. If we're going to put a bylaw in place, not only put a bylaw in place that limits what you can do, but make sure people are doing it. That's the problem here. And that was the problem with the old bylaw. There was no teeth in it to go and say, you're burning improper wood. You should be fined. If you're burning a bonfire in your backyard, you should be fined. That's how this should go. And if you don't have a permit, you should be fined. And, we're not here defending the rights of those who are going to do it illegally anyway. We're here to say, look, it has to be reasonable, respectful, and safe. That's the issue here. We're looking for safe, responsible and respectful fires. That's what we're asking for, not the bonfires that we picture in our head that are out in the fields, what we've all had at one point in time. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for a respectful compromise here. That's what we're looking for. And I think if you look through our presentation, we give you, I don't want to regurgitate the whole thing. You just need to look through it, and there's some ideas in there that are legitimate reasons, and we're not asking for anything that's outside the box of what you think would be proper. And that's what we're hoping you do. We hope you take some time to look at what we've presented here, because there are some respectful, responsible, safe ideas in here.
Councillor Dupel?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for your presentation. So, you know, always when we get to issues that are close to everybody, it's hard when you go back to the fluoride debate. You know, you got both sides, and I'm in my 10th year of sitting as a city councillor, and I can tell you that we've been dealing with this. I have for the last 10 years. I don't think maybe in the day there was an appetite around council to put the ban through. So I can tell you that I've received lots of calls, probably as many as that are opposed to it, that are in favor of it. I guess where I have a hard time with is when I look at, you know, the 260 people who have a ballot. I always feel bad for those people who follow the rules, who do what they're supposed to do, and lead by example. And then you have all of the other people who don't lead by example. The survey that we put out actually shows you that, because we know in-house that we have 260 permits, but we have almost 500 people who say they have a permit in the survey. So, you know, numbers are numbers, and things will be that, and at the end of the day, we have to make a decision that, that you know, is what you think the majority of people that you represent as a councillor would want you to do, and respectfully for both sides. You know, I know that health issues are high on the radar, and I realize that you can number and debate that. But I mean, it is something I voted through the 2/3 majority to hear you, because I believe that everybody should be heard. But at the end of the day, everybody, you know, 11 elected officials have to make a decision.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That's the way we go. But again, I say that for those people who have followed the rules, and you know, probably invested in their backyards, and you know, for me, that troubles me that only 260 people are following the rules, but now we have 2,000 people saying that, you know, we should. So is it, I don't know, it's, you know, it's really hard to, when you put the numbers together, but I mean, at the end of the day, reality, we'll all make an individual informed vote here, and we'll move on and move forward from there.
Mr. Rivette?
I absolutely agree. A lot more people are burning without permits, and I'll tell you why. Because nobody's enforcing it. The problem is not the burning. The problem is the enforcement, and I don't think it's the fire department's fault. I think the bylaw, as it was written, does not allow you to have enough teeth. And we talked about this. We talked about the bylaw not having enough teeth for our fire chief was in to go out there and get it under control. So if you were to put something together which said, look, you don't have a permit, here's a $500 fine. You know what I mean? Put some hard numbers to that stuff, and I'm sure that would change the whole way this works, and we'd be talking about revenue for the city instead of, you know, not collecting any revenues. But it's giving a bylaw that actually has some teeth, and that last bylaw did not.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Muir?
I just want to close with that all we're asking is exactly what you're talking about, is that everybody around this table will consider rewriting something that can be presented and come up with a compromise. And, you know, as citizens, that's all we can ask for, is that we have an opportunity to come with something fair, you know, instead of just, this is it and it's cut and dry. And we respectfully ask that.
Yeah, well, again, thank you for your time. We appreciate you hearing us.
Any other councillors want to speak on this matter? So I will tell you that I have heard from lots of people on this issue, on both sides of the issue. And what is remarkable to me is how much people wanted to talk about this, right? The reaction was strong. And the problem I had with this process is that we didn't do the consultation piece before. So this is why we had the special council meeting. This is why we paused. This is why we went back to hear from you. So I'm glad that you've stepped forward and done that. Now it'll be up to us to determine how to proceed. And procedurally, it may be complicated, right? But we need to be able to do consultation before we make decision. We need to understand sometimes that certain decisions that we make touch people in a way that we may not have expected, that we may not have predicted, but that we need to understand. Whether we agree or not is something else, and that debate takes place here. But in the meantime, we need to hear you before we have that debate. So I want to thank you for being here and presenting, and I want to accept the petition formally.
A few pages to fill.
So I'm going to give that to the clerk as soon as you pass it. Yep. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your presentation. Appreciate it. Madam Clerk.
We now have our consent agenda, Madam Mayor. Proclamation of Kin Canada Week, with a recommendation that Council proclaim the week of February 16th to 22nd, 2020 as Kin Canada Week in the City of Cornwall, and to approve the request for the flag raising of the Kin flag. PAC report, with a recommendation that Council approve the housekeeping items contained in Section E, Evaluation of the Housekeeping Number 29 report. Changes to the provincial hazmat program, with a recommendation that Council receive this report for information purposes.
Need a motion for those items? Councillor DePel and Councillor Towndale, any discussion? All in favor? Carried.
Unfinished business reports. The first one, municipal tax exemption. War Veterans Organizations has two options recommended. The first one would be that Council provide a municipal tax exemption of 100% to the following three war veterans organizations from 2020 to 2029: Army, Navy, and Air Force Association, Navy Veterans Association, and Royal Canadian Air Force Association. And the second option is looking for a council to provide direction to administration.
So is there a motion? Councillor McDonald and then Councillor Bergeron? Did you want to make a motion?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, no, I want information first.
Sure. You have a question?
Okay, so yes, my question is this: what's the current tax exemption for those bodies, for the Army, Navy, and Navy veterans and Royal Canadian Air Force? Is it 100% now?
So I'll direct the question to Madam CFO. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Currently, the three associations have a 50% exemption by bylaw or through bylaw.
Thank you. And what exemption do churches have?
Madam CFO?
I'm sorry, I don't have that with me this
Are there any other groups that have exemptions from tax? Any property owners?
I would have to go through the file. I didn't bring that.
Okay.
It's specifically related to
Thank you.
war veterans.
Okay, then I guess a follow-up question to your first answer, to my first question. Do the service bodies bring any reason why they're asking for us to double their tax exemption from 50% to 100%?
Madam
Through you,
CFO?
Madam Mayor, what we've seen with other municipalities following the Ontario government approving through the Municipal Act that the Royal Canadian Legions of Ontario are exempt. That's through the Municipal Act. We've seen other municipalities also exempt taxes for their other war veterans associations.
I see. So the Ontario government exempted the Legion, but that's all, and municipalities have given the same benefit to other groups, other military groups.
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes, the Municipal Act, though, does allow for municipalities to exempt these organizations to 100% for a period of 10 years.
Okay.
Okay. I have Councillor Bergeron, and then Councillor Hollingsworth, and then Councillor Grant. Councillor Bergeron,
Yes, I'd like to make the motion to adopt option 1, please.
is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Hollingsworth? Do you want to speak to it now, Councillor Bergeron?
I do.
Can I hear what the motion was, because he was looking down?
Sure. Councillor Bergeron?
Well, I'm going by the recommendation. Option 1, that council provide a municipal tax exemption of 100% to the following 3 war veterans organizations for the years 2020-29: Army, Navy, Air Force Association, Navy Veterans Association, and Royal Canadian Air Force Association. Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Bergeron.
I fully support this. There's about 100 things in the budget I would have cut prior to supporting something like this, so I'm entirely in favor of doing this.
Councillor Hollingsworth?
Thank you, Your Worship. I support the motion as it is. Just one couple of quick questions, though, just so that I'm crystal clear. To give these organizations exemptions, did I read $19,000 is what it works out to be?
Madam CFO?
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes, that is correct. It's
Now,
about
is
$19,000
that
a year.
19,000 over and above what we have budgeted for the 50% exemption, or is it 19,000 if it was 100 and 9.5 if it was 50
$19,000 in total.
total?
Yes, that's it.
Okay, so what would it be if we had said, if this motion doesn't carry, I hope it does, but what would it be in terms of from a budget perspective if we stayed at the 50%?
So half of that.
Okay, good enough. So I want to just make sure. That being said, we're good. Thank you. That being said, Your Worship, it's not really a ton of money in terms of the grand scheme of the things in terms of our corporation, but I suspect it would go a long way to these organizations to providing services and facilities for veterans and people who have, quite frankly, put their lives on the line. So I'll support the motion. I don't see any downside to it.
Councillor Grant?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I sent the clerk a question today, but perhaps she didn't receive it, but it's and maybe she didn't have the answer, but how do you get to be a veteran status? I belong to the Army, Navy, and Air Force Club, and when I was there, I remember seeing a veteran. And I'm just wondering how they get the status of this. Secondly, do we get financial statements from them to justify going broke? I don't know. I've been in some of these places and they seem to be doing all right. And plus, I get arguments from the community about they're competing with restaurants, they're competing with businesses in town because they're now going into the business of cooking meals for people, selling meals, taking away from people that are paying 100%. And I said, well, it's only 50% tax that we take back or exempt them on. We go to 100%, they're competing with our businesses in town. So I would like to see, before I support this, I'd like to see financial statements and exactly what do they do with the dollars that they earn. I think they support the community, but I don't know that for a fact. And I know that the restaurant owners and the hotel owners, et cetera, get pretty upset with this. So I'm not going to support it unless I get those answers to those questions.
Madam CFO, can you answer any of those questions in terms of what documentation they have to provide?
Through you, Madam Mayor, it would be information that MPAC would have on file regarding the association. And so we take a look at club service, et cetera. And so these are the ones that when I spoke with the city's assessor, had given me that it could be applied through the Municipal Act, specifically exempt from taxation land that is used and occupied by veterans as a memorial house, clubhouse, or athletic grounds, specifically listed in the Municipal Act. So these organizations do qualify. We do not receive financial statements from these organizations at this time.
Does that answer some of your question? I think the part as to status, I don't know if anybody has an answer to that. Any follow-up?
I'd like to make a motion to defer this until those questions are answered.
So a motion to defer is always in order, seconded by, is there any seconder? Councillor Dupel? So the debate is now on the motion to defer. Councillor McIntosh. Go ahead.
I imagine the genesis of this is the provincial government's decision to exempt Royal Canadian Legion. Municipalities had no choice. You had to exempt them. So I imagine the other guys are saying, hey, what about us? Really, they are in competition with each other when it comes to business. So have we collected any taxes yet through you, Madam Mayor, to Tracy? Have we
Madam
collected taxes yet for any of these organizations?
Madam CFO?
Through you, Madam Mayor, at this time, a bylaw is in place that they pay 50% of taxes levied. So yes, they pay 50% of taxes.
And we have collected the first installment?
But not this year. The first installment hasn't been up for 2020, but definitely for prior years.
Yeah.
We've had a bylaw in place now since 2002.
Yeah, so we're not refunding any money.
No, once a bylaw is passed, we actually send that bylaw to MPAC, and they bill accordingly, so that there's no refund that happens. It's an exemption on that property.
When we're talking about Councillor Grant's motion to ask for financial statements, we will not be asking the Royal Canadian Legion for the same thing. Okay.
Madam CFO?
Through you, Madam Mayor, that is correct. The Municipal Act indicates that any lands with a Royal Canadian Legion is not only exempt from municipal taxes, but also education taxes.
So while we'll be asking the other three groups to submit financial statements, we will not be asking the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 297 to submit financial statements because they're exempt under provincial legislation.
We would not, it's
Yeah.
regulated.
And there are no more veterans I'm guessing here, no more veterans probably at the Royal Canadian Legion than there are at the Wing or the Navy or the Royal, the Army Air Force thing. So I have some problems with that.
Councillor Towndale and then Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think the question came up under what the definition of a veteran is. According to Veteran Affairs Canada, it's someone who's completed their basic military qualification. That's the official definition used by the Government of Canada, just for clarity. I'm a serving member currently. You know, the one thing the Legion has going for them is that they're the best known veterans organization, probably because at one time they were the largest, but they're not the only one. I think that's illustrated here. I mean, the Air Force Association is predominantly for members of the Air Force. And we have the Navy Club and the Army, Navy, and Air Force Association here as well. I'll be voting against the deferral because I'm ready to vote in favor of this exemption tonight. I think that there is value that these organizations provide to the community, and that goes back to why they were founded at the time. Now, it is true today there may not be as many veterans as members. I can attest to that. That goes for the Legion as well, though, but the Legion got an exemption provincially, truthfully, probably because they lobbied the provincial government, because they have the manpower and the resources to do that. These, I don't mean this in a bad way, but these organizations are smaller in scope. They don't have the ability to do that. Other municipalities have taken steps to provide exemptions for them. We should do the same. I mean, I think it's the right thing to do, so I'll be supporting it. Thank you.
Councillor Gardner.
I'll vote against the deferral because I've been involved with the injured workers, they take a veteran to dinner for 3 years now, and they come from every service that's available. So I'm going to vote in favor of the initial motion, but not in favor of deferral. These folks come in, we pick them up in limousines, it's all sponsored. They kept this country free, and for that, we can do whatever we can for them, and thank you for being here. Of course, I've got to go through the chair. I'm involved with some music in one of the clubs, actually 2 of the clubs, and there are veterans there, so I'm going to support the initial.
Is there any further discussion on this? Councillor Bergeron?
Thank you. I'm not in favor of the deferral. I think our veterans have paid enough. Probably would have made the motion regardless to bring this forward at 100% tax exemption had I not known that the Legion was getting this percentage as well. So I'm not in favor of the referral.
Anybody else? Councillor Hollingsworth.
Just going to echo perhaps some comments. I'm not in favor of the deferral. I'm ready to move forward. The truth of the matter is this. If you break it down, we're talking about $3,000 per organization, which might help them a lot. But $3,000 to the municipality for organization. It's, as a colleague, Councillor Green used to make reference, we spill more than that in the morning. So I'm gonna vote against the deferral and support the motion.
Any further discussion? I'm going to vote also against the deferral. I'm prepared to move forward and support this evening. As an elected official, as the mayor, I spend a lot of time in all three of these places. What that means to me is that a lot of community activities take place there. That's what matters to me as the mayor. I like to see that people are using these spaces in ways that support community. And I thank Councillor Towndale for the definition of a veteran. That's makes things more clear. All in favor of the deferral? Against? So back to the main motion. Any further discussion? Welcome to Council, Councillor Hébert. I know you're not well, and I know you're here because you care. So we appreciate that. Any further discussion on the main motion? All in favor? Against? Carried. Next item.
Open air fire public consultation report. Recommendation is that council receive this report and approve the proposed bylaw to cease the practice of open air burning in the city of Cornwall.
Councillor Bennett's had his hand up for the last 2 minutes.
I would like to make a motion to reconsider this open air fire ban, just until we get an opportunity to maybe make a draft a bylaw with much more teeth involved in it and see if that's something that works for us. So to do that, I think we need to, a motion to reconsider and see where that goes.
Is there a seconder for the motion to reconsider? Councillor Bergeron? So I'd like,
I'm sorry, Madam Mayor?
yes.
The motion must be moved and seconded by two members that did not vote in.
So Councillor Bergeron is out. Councillor Bennett can make the motion, and we need a seconder who voted with the majority. Councillor Hébert.
Madam Mayor.
So, Madam Clerk, can you take us through the rules around a motion to reconsider, please?
So the motion to reconsider, this motion right here, has to be moved by two people who were not on the prevailing side when the motion passed before, which we have now. And the second thing is that we need a 2/3 majority at this vote here to be able to bring up the issue again.
So how does debate take place exactly?
Point of clarification.
Yes.
Who was the mover and seconder?
Councillor Bennett moved it, and Councillor Hébert seconded it. Can you go over the rules of debate around a motion to reconsider, please, Madam Clerk?
So the debate around this motion only can be with the mover and seconder on the reconsideration only, not on the merits of the reconsideration itself.
So what does that mean exactly?
That Councillor Bennett and Councillor Hébert can put a case forward on why they want this issue to be reconsidered.
And others?
Not at this time. Only if it passes the 2/3 majority, we move on to the motion itself, then everyone is allowed to participate.
Is everybody clear with that? Councillor McIntosh, you have a question.
I'd like to, for Councillor Bennett to explain why he wants the deferral. Is it based on what we heard tonight from the presenters?
Well, I'll tell you.
So we'll hear that. It's a motion to reconsider. It's not a motion to defer.
Councillor Heber did not hear the presentations.
I heard it all.
Yes, I think that Councillor Hébert was watching the meeting online. Is that correct, Councillor Hébert?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's probably still playing out loud in my apartment.
Okay. Any other questions on the process? Because we don't often do motions to reconsider, and we have guests in our council chambers, so I like to have it made clear for everybody who's watching and everybody who's here. Any other questions from council on the process? So I'm going to turn to Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you. I guess my motion to reconsider was based on a lot of what I said previously when they were here. No, it didn't have anything to do with the fact that they presented tonight. I've been thinking about this for a little while. I just think that at the end of the day, the process was backwards. And so I think what we need to do is, we already know that there's a ban now. We know that. What we need to do, though, is, I think what we need to do, in my opinion, is we need to draft a bylaw that has some serious teeth in it, because the biggest complaint I've heard is, from one side, is that the bylaw didn't have any teeth, and there was never any fines laid. The people I've listened to, and I've listened to a lot of people, believe me, it'd be amazing how many people stop to talk to you when you're filling strawberries. So they come and there was both sides, and people were thanking us for it, and I get it, and other people were giving me the gears, and that's fine too. But what I think is that the process was backwards, and I think we didn't get the chance for public consultation, and now that we're having a conversation, I think that's at least healthy. So let's just draft a bylaw with stricter regulations in it and take a look at it. I'm not saying that we're gonna change your vote when you look at the bylaw, but at least you have an option. We didn't have an option the first time. It was either you want it or you don't, and so that was the end of the conversation. This time, I think what we need to do is, so option A is still on the table. There's a ban. That's our right to vote. But I think to vote, I guess to vote for myself, to say that I did the right thing, I would like to hear what the comparison is to the no. And the no is the bylaw that has a fire, but simple things like more space between structures, wind speed alerts, smog alerts, 18-inch fire pits, not these monstrosities that people sending me pictures of all the time. Those kinds of things I think need to be addressed, and then we can look at that bylaw, and then we can decide then, is this something we feel comfortable with, or is this something we don't think is going to address the concerns we had originally? And if that's the case, then we vote it down. But at least give it the opportunity just to listen to what was been told to us. There are options. People seem to think that there are ways to have these fires safe and nuisance-free and take care of health concerns. And I would like to see a bylaw drafted that takes care of those concerns, but that enough to change a vote, because I was a no vote. And it would have to be a very, very compelling bylaw for me to change back. But I think the people that show their concerns deserve the opportunity for us to at least take a look at that. So that was the reason for my motion to reconsider.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Councillor Hébert, are you okay?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to sit if you don't mind.
I think your colleagues are going to be okay with that.
Everyone's cool with that. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. When we deferred this bylaw for public consultation, I was under the impression that we would come back with some kind of compromise. I think that was the direction we had provided administration. And it seems as though that didn't quite happen. And I was supportive of the ban. And I'm not saying that I might change my vote, but I was very much under the impression that when it would come back to us, that there would be some kind of compromise proposed to us, and it wasn't. And when it was brought to us, I was undecided. I think I made up my decision standing right there in front of all of you, because I can see both sides of the story. I have people in my life with respiratory issues, and I could not imagine what it's like to not being able to breathe. I mean, I haven't for 2 days, so I can only imagine what it's like for their entire summers. But I have also was raised in the country and had bonfires, and my mom burns and has fires, and she'll probably be mad at me tonight if we support a ban. But she loves me, so that's okay. And so I certainly see both sides of it. And I want to provide an opportunity to come with a compromise, and there was some good arguments proposed, good compromises proposed this evening. I was watching, and I think we need to provide a bit more opportunity to come with a compromise. If we can't come up with a compromise, I will support providing somebody the opportunity to breathe fresh air versus the opportunity for a family to have a recreational activity. I'm sorry. That's just the way I see it. I think people have the right to breathe versus family having a fire. There are alternatives. There are propane fires. There are other things families can do. But I am not prepared to vote on that until I can see options. And if none can come to the table, or nothing that is feasible, then I will vote health before recreation. I'm sorry, but I do want to see effort made for a compromise first. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hébert. So now it's the vote.
Recorded vote, please.
Madam Clerk.
Councillors Claude McIntosh,
No deferral.
Reconsider.
No to reconsider,
to reconsider.
whatever.
Is that a yes or a no, Councillor?
I don't want to reconsider.
You don't, okay. Councillors Elaine McDonald,
No.
Sid Gardner,
No.
Dean Hollingsworth,
Yes.
Caroline Ebar,
Yes.
Councillors Modeste Dupel,
No.
Glenn Grant,
No.
Todd Bennett,
Yes.
Justin Towndale,
Yes.
Éric Bergeron,
Yes.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
1, 2, 3, 4. We are too short of our 2/3 majority, so the motion is defeated.
Okay. So we go back to that item, is that it?
That was the motion to reconsider was defeated, so the original motion is on the floor if it gets moved and seconded. Would you like me to read it again, Madam
Yes,
Mayor?
please.
That council receive this report and approve the proposed bylaw to cease the practice of open-air burning in the city of Cornwall.
Is there a mover for that? Councillor Gardner, is there a seconder? Councillor Grant. Debate. Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Your Worship. I want it noted for the record that I stayed fairly silent through everything else so that I could say what I wanted to say in my moment of truth. A couple of things that I thought was interesting, Your Worship. A couple months ago, when we discussed going to public consultation, everybody said we should have public consultation because we're going to listen to what the public has to say. Curious how that's worked out, isn't it? We have some numbers here. I believe the percentages are ratios about 7-1 in favor of opposing the ban, yet many of my colleagues have said, we don't care. Fair enough. You don't have to listen to the numbers. So much for democracy. We don't care. We're doing what we want anyway. Fair enough. The other thing that's interesting is this. The group came this evening to us and suggested a compromise. We have an alternative. We have a colleague across the table who even suggested let's reconsider and we'll have council or admin come up with a report reviewing some of these compromises, and once again it would seem, and from what I think the numbers are going to suggest, we're not interested in compromises. This is just how it's going to be, and that's the end of it. The other thing that's noteworthy, Your Worship, forgetting compromise and all of those kinds of things, I threw this out to my classes this morning because I teach civics. It's kind of what we do, and I was curious as to see what the bright young minds of tomorrow, or today and tomorrow, had to offer, and they presented some interesting things. One student suggested perhaps the bylaw could say specific days. Only on Friday you're allowed to burn, and I thought that might be a compromise. Some students suggested specific times. You can have a fire from 7 o'clock at night till 10 o'clock at night, and then that's kind of the end of it. So people have suggested that during the daytime they're inundated with smoke, kind of a in-between. I thought that was interesting as well. But I'm not getting a sense that my colleagues around the table are prepared to interested in hearing any of those kinds of discussions because their minds are already made up. They would suggest health and breathing is an issue, which nobody around this table would argue with that, but if you want to take that as your main reason for banning wood-burning fires, then logically speaking, you should also have a ban against fireplaces because they produce smoke. You should also have a ban against wood stoves because they produce smoke. You should also have a ban against those little fires, the ones that have the wood pellets, because once again they produce smoke as well. The presentation made an interesting point, which is also noteworthy, that if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, Chief, do you not oblige people to have carbon monoxide detectors in their homes? Mm-hmm. So we ask carbon monoxide detectors in people's homes because they produce gases that will kill us, but somehow carbon monoxide gas seems to be fine if you're doing it outside. Fair enough. I'm not seeing how the correlation works up, but I'm not a scientist, so maybe I'm missing something. The thing is, Your Worship, the last thing that I want to ask before Chief, if I'm not mistaken, have we issued any fines for anybody who's broken the rules?
Chief Voisin?
So through you, Madam Mayor, certainly not in my time here. Our method of dealing with this issue has been, number one, when we're called to an issue, we will extinguish the fire, depending on the situation, of course. And we have revoked some permits, but we have not issued a fine.
Fair enough, thank you. One other question, Your Worship, and I'm not sure who I'm directing it to. I'm thinking Mr. Boileau, but in terms of bylaw, if somebody is breaking a bylaw and we don't have bylaw officers on duty, so it's after when their traditional hours of working, who then enforces that bylaw?
Mr. Boileau?
And I'm thinking it's you, Mr. Boileau, but.
Through you, Madam Mayor. So the enforcement officers that we currently have work till 6.
Right.
The police would normally take care of matters unless there are other bylaw officers who can deal with the matter. I think we talked a bit about some street violations and that sort of thing, but generally the police.
Please, thank you. So my point, Your Worship, is in terms of fires where people are breaking the bylaw, it's kind of almost like we're sending the wrong group to deal with it. It's a bylaw issue, so why aren't we sending the police to deal with it as opposed to the fire department? In the sense that the fire department, correct me if I'm, feel free to jump in, but if I'm not mistaken, the fire department can issue fines, but there's there's only so much wiggle room they have in terms of what they're allowed to do. The bottom line, Your Worship, is I'm not going to support a complete fire ban. We haven't explored options in terms of compromise. We did have public consultation, and based on the numbers, if public consultation is supposed to count for anything, which it doesn't seem that it does, but if it's supposed to count for anything, it would seem the majority of the people who responded are not in favor of the ban. So at the very least, I would think that we should at least look and see if there's any kind of compromise bylaw as presented by this particular group and people who called in and the like, and it doesn't seem that that's the case. So because I don't see any will to compromise, I suspect it'll probably pass, but I'm not prepared to support it because as far as democracy is concerned, it doesn't seem like that's what the majority of the people want.
I have Councillor Grant and then Councillor McDonald. Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I noticed the petition there that was brought out with a number of signatures. I put, over my lifetime, probably about 30 petitions together. About 10% of people read the petition, they just sign it. So I'm not saying that that's not a justifiable petition. I'm using my history of saying people will sign just about anything. The next thing, we did get a report from administration that said we should have this fire ban. So we did have something from administration. And as I keep talking about, and people, I don't know why people can't understand, the health of people should be a priority for us in our community. The health for the environment as well as the health of our residents. And if people want to take it upon themselves to have a bonfire, start camping. I know that's what I did when I was a young guy and had a young family. We went camping. I lived outside of the city of Cornwall. Never had a fire in my backyard. But I went camping. And talking about the pleasures of having a hot dog, you can do that with a propane burner. It's just boggles my mind that people aren't considering the health and safety of the people in our community. It's disappointing to me.
Councillor McDonald and then Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to address a couple of points that I haven't addressed before because I don't want to bore everybody. I'd like to say that in terms of the consultation process, early on, I did ask if this was in any way going to be understood to be a referendum. And I think it was clear that it was not supposed to be a referendum. I think what it was an opportunity for us to hear conflicting viewpoints and then weigh the logic of those viewpoints. And frankly, no matter how many times I heard certain arguments, they did not outweigh what I read being issued by the Eastern Ontario Health Unit. So, I mean, 1,000 people saying the fun of burning is worth the danger to your neighbors. And one man, Dr. Paul Remiliotis, authors the statement that wood burning is harmful even if you don't have a pre-existing lung condition. Well, to my mind, that cancels the 1,000 people who think the fun is worth the jeopardy to somebody's health. Because no matter how many people wrote in, I think maybe a lot of people thought that if there was a lot of pressure and a lot of signatures, that this would turn into kind of a quasi-referendum and our hands would be tied. Not the case. If I heard arguments that would outweigh this position that I have, then I would accept them and change my mind. Now, the other point I want to make is with regard to compromise. I don't see a good compromise. Like really, I think it's interesting the students suggested, you know, so many hours. So you hold your breath for those hours, or maybe you only burn on alternate days of the week, and on those days you stay in, you don't go in your backyard. This isn't the kind of situation where I think you can compromise like that. Like I can see compromising one day the streets are for bikes, one day they're for cars, because nobody is hurt by that difference, but one day people can burn, one they can't. That is harmful. Now the last thing, we talk about putting teeth in the bylaw. I suppose that means higher penalties if somebody breaks the bylaw. But we always come back to this argument, we haven't got bylaw officers, therefore we can't put a good rule in place. Well, I mean, we could tie up our fire department, we could tie up our police department, and you still can't legislate common sense, so you get people out there burning when they shouldn't. And besides, what police officer or bylaw officer, maybe a fireman, might be qualified to look at a piece of wood that's burning and say, hardwood, this is painted wood, or it was painted half an hour ago before the outside of it got charred, whatever. Like, we can tie our people up trying to supervise the fires, and I just don't think that it's worth us hiring 20 more bylaw officers so we can actually enforce this thing. No, I think that the health and the pleasure of everybody having access to clean air is, to my mind, the main argument. Even for the healthy people. You don't have to be sick to want to breathe freely. Thank you.
Councillor Gardner.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I want to clarify something. I do care. Anybody who doesn't think I care, too bad for them. I'm going to read this. Immediate symptoms of exposure to wood smoke include burning eyes, running nose, irritation of the airways, coughing or difficulty breathing, worsening or pre-existing lung conditions, asthma and chronic bronchitis. Long-term exposure to wood smoke has been associated with reduced lung function, the development of bronchitis, premature death, heart attacks, irregular heartbeat, cancer, infant mortality, and low birth weight. Although wood smoke can affect everyone, young children, the elderly, people with lung disease, including asthma and COPD, people with heart diseases, and expectant mothers and their unborn babies are the most vulnerable. And that's what made me decide that I am going to vote in favor of a total ban. I do care.
Any other discussion on this? Councillor Bergeron?
Dr. Paul, by the way, came from Dr. Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've heard all the debate. And I have a lot to say on this, but I'm going to go straight to first a point of clarity. We're 6 councillors approved and 5 voted against. Does this motion require a 2/3 majority?
Madam Clerk.
The motion that's not currently on the floor?
Yeah.
No.
So we're in a bit of a procedural statement here. 6 councillors said we should reconsider this, but it required 2/3, and now we're debating the motion on the floor. the motion is that it's an outright ban. I agree with what Councillor Hubert said, I agree with what Councillor Bennett said, in full and complete support. I agree with what Councillor Hollingsworth said. To me, this is, I would have liked to see two motions come back. I would have liked to see, you know, we admitted as a council that public input was necessary here. And boy, did we hear from the public. I don't know about you, I've heard about this more than any other issue. A 2,000 person petition, 1,700 people responded to a survey. I read them all, I read all the ideas. I saw a whole bunch of ideas on how we could compromise between what the two of you are saying, or the four of you are saying, which I absolutely have no issue with. I think the difference is, I think there's a compromise between that. We have a lot of bylaws that are enforced so that you, as a neighbor, have rights over your other neighbor. My neighbor blows his snowplow into my lawn all the time. We have bylaws to enforce that. I don't have to worry about that. There are bylaws where we can negotiate that. And this is a perfect example to me of where there's a compromise in the middle. So I'm not going to repeat what was said because it was clear as day to me. What you said, what you said, and what you said is why we're here. I see, I would have loved to see two options for us to vote on today and to debate on today. That is not the case, and so I must defeat the motion that is on the floor because I believe there is a compromise that can be made, and I believe 6 out of 11 people also agree with that. Thank you.
Councillor Towndale.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to echo Councillor Bergeron's comments pretty much exactly, to tell you the truth, and Councillor Hollingsworth. I think they both spoke very well in this issue, and I can't hope to match that. But I'm going to just speak on a couple other points that I want to highlight. They were raised to an extent, but I do agree. I believe the process in this case was backwards. I think, you know, we talked about revising a bylaw, and while not many people had permits or fire pits, bylaws affect everyone in the city equally, regardless. What if somebody moves? You know, things change. So we went backwards, and we received public input. We're going on 6 years of council for myself. That's the largest survey input I've seen so far for anything we've done, including budgets. This petition here, I haven't had a look at it, but 2,000 signatures, largest petition I've seen as well. It's clear what the majority of people who responded want. There's obviously the silent majority, but we're listening to those who spoke up. I understand, you know, the statements put out by the Eastern Ontario Health Unit about the dangers of wood smoke. I get that. But are they going to go ban campgrounds? And while you can say, well, it's an open space, I think my colleague brought up a good point. You know, we don't require carbon monoxide detectors outside for fuel-based appliances. I'm going to tell you a little story here. I was at Brigade in Ottawa this weekend, and we were running an exercise for natural disasters. And we were modeling it on what was called Operation Lentis, which is flooding. And generally, Lentis is any domestic operation, so it was flooding in the Ottawa Valley in this case. And something that actually happened was brought up, where there were some troops working around a generator outside, and they actually got carbon monoxide poisoning. They're in a well-ventilated area. It still happened. So, I mean, you know, we say these devices are safer. I don't think so. There's actually proof that they might not be. But I really do think that the original motion was a knee-jerk reaction. I think there is a compromise available on the table. Other municipalities have it. I think that there's been some thoughtful presentations that can show us that we can come to a compromise on this. I think the city of Woodstock has it right. I really do. When it comes to tainted wood, well, you know, Councilor McDonald, you're right. How do you tell offhand? But there are some signs. Smoke will be darker, thicker. There will be a smell in the air. You can smell the toxins coming off the wood. The flame will be blue if there's something burning that shouldn't be there. So you can generally tell, and by the first look, it's easy to identify wood that shouldn't be burned. But at the end of the day, you know, we heard today about keeping peaceful neighborhoods. I'm afraid we can't legislate good neighbors. This was brought up, I think, by Councillor Hollingsworth at one of the original discussions of this. Unfortunately, there will be friction in neighborhoods. There always will be. It's just kind of the nature of the beast when you get people together. We have discussions around this table all the time. We don't always agree. Right now, there's a number of us on opposite sides of this issue. You know, we're not always going to be unanimous. In fact, I think it's very rare that we are. That shows you what happens in neighborhood. It's never going to be 100%. So, you know, I'd like to echo exactly what Councilor Bergeron said, and said, this motion, because I think there's a compromise out there. And I think that majority of residents who responded have shown us they want us to look for that compromise. Thank you.
Councillor McIntosh.
I don't know how many people were around for the great smoking debate. I know Sid was.
I
This is
was.
following the same path as the smoking debate. Everybody said, oh, that's an infringement on the person's right to smoke. And they went along with that until the scientific studies came out and said, you know, secondhand smoke is worse than smoke. Then it got serious, and people said, you know what? We got to stop it because the secondhand, it's not the smoker we're worried about, the person, the innocent person who's breathing in secondhand smoke. Lots of science said that that's, you know, was a fact. It's interesting that I hear people talk about climate change. We got to have fewer, go to electric vehicles and that. Chief, how many, 500 people said they had fires in this, burned fires that admitted to it?
Through you, Madam Mayor, according to the
Yes.
survey.
Yeah. I'm trying to picture a Friday and Saturday night with 800 people lighting up fires in their backyard. You ever hear of a thing called thermal inversion, where it hangs low? Well, where are the people, the big climate change people, who want to support, they said, oh, bands, that's too serious. We got to allow people to have fires. Still harmful for the environment. I'm interested if that'll come back from the Climate Change Committee. I take great umbrage with Dean's thing, some people don't care. I care. I'd love to have a fire in my backyard. I've got a young neighbor who has a COPD. I wouldn't even think of starting a fire. She wouldn't complain, but I'm not going to do it because it would deny her the right to sit in her backyard while I'm enjoying a fire. We talk about small fires and big fires. Small fire, big fire, it's all burning wood. Somebody talked about the police are going to enforce this. I invite anybody who thinks that to go on a police ride on a Friday and Saturday night in this town when they got 6 officers on duty handling mental health cases, domestics, and everything else, and see if they got time to enforce going out and check on a fire. It's simple. We have speeding laws. Not everybody gets caught, but there's a thing we just don't allow it. We don't want people to do it. I just going to research some people. No, these people may not know too much. Dr. Brian Mitch, president of the Utah Physicians for Healthy and Environment. He says there are 200 toxic chemicals in wood smoke, some of the most deadly known to mankind. One of the most toxic types of pollution. Dr. Steve Bendel of the University of Washington says burning 10 pounds of wood over an hour produces more toxic chemicals than 120,000 cigarettes smoked at the same time. Says breathing in wood smoke, one of the most dangerous things a person can do. It's all about health. The safety thing, I don't think there's ever been a fire in this town started because somebody had a fire in their backyard, a fire pit. But we have 2,000 people signed a petition. Oh, John, I can go and get 2,000 names saying our tax increase was too high. Were we going to reconsider the tax increase? Did we have public consultation on the tax increase? No.
Some of us would.
If somebody, and Terry's petition took about 2.5 minutes to read. I'm willing to bet that some of those people said, give me the thing, sign it. Nobody takes a petition, reads that long, and signs it.
Make that assumption.
I have no problem with the ban. It's all about health. I don't know how you compromise health. You know, you can have fire certain hours, certain parts of town. Smoke lingers, it travels. It goes from one neighborhood to the next. And I no doubt, no question, maybe more people would want fires or don't care than the people who have breathing problems. And those are the ones I'm thinking of. The 500, 600 people in this town who have breathing problems and want to sit out in their backyard. One lady said her smoke alarm went off inside her kitchen because the neighbor had a fire going outside. Those are the people I'm worried about. I'm not going to say to them, suck it up. I'm just not going to do it.
Anybody else? Thank you.
Madam Mayor, may I, can we just get some clarification on,
Councillor Baer?
on the motion itself? And, I mean, if we can't reconsider, then if we're just, are we just voting to approve this report? If it's turned down, what's the?
Madam Clerk?
We're just approving the bylaw. If
Through
we
you,
don't
Madam
approve
Mayor,
the
so-
bylaw, what's the case?
Right.
It's more step 2 of the process. So council already decided and voted on
Right.
banning the fire. This is a second step in preparing the bylaw.
And so if I may, if it doesn't pass, what happens?
You have a ban on fires without a bylaw on the books.
Okay.
Any further discussion?
I don't understand.
Councillor McDonald?
Through you, Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I just really want to be clear about this. I think that, I'm trying to find the page that our resolution is written on. Who's got it? Anybody?
Page 58.
Sorry?
Page 58. Thank you, Councillor Grant.
Thank you. On 59. So, we are to receive the report and approve the proposed bylaw to cease the practice of open-air burning in the city of Cornwall. Draft bylaw provided. Okay, so I'm clear. So we're going to vote on whether or not we're going to cease the practice of open-air burning.
Right.
Thank you.
I hope I can get through this. I've been talking all day.
Point of clarification,
Part of the
Madam
job.
Mayor.
Councillor DePel?
Through you to the clerk, so we're voting on whether or not we go to the second phase of this, because we've already voted on the ban? Is that what I'm understanding?
Madam Clerk?
Through you, Madam Mayor, council did already cease the practice of open fires. So the decision has been made. Tried to reconsider it, it didn't go through.
Okay.
So now we're simply voting on the second step of the decision, and that is to put the bylaw on the books.
So, thank you, Madam
Councillor
Mayor.
Bass?
So no matter what, there's still a ban. There would just be a bylaw to create order around it. Well,
Madam CAO?
Through you, Madam Mayor. So, in August, when the matter was first brought forward to council, the recommendation to council was that council approve the recommendation to rescind the previous bylaw and replace it with an updated bylaw which ceases the practice of open-air burning in the city of Cornwall. So we brought that matter forward. Council approved that recommendation. Administration has brought back the bylaw that is consistent with that decision of council. If that bylaw is approved this evening, it will be placed on the next agenda with our list of bylaws for adoption.
If it's not,
If it's not, we have no bylaw on the books now because we've rescinded the previous bylaw, and there's no bylaw.
so we might as well vote. Okay.
So, I'm sure my neighbor Dennis is watching. He's a perfect neighbor, has a fire pit, burns not that often, quietly, the clean stuff, has a double lot. I also have a very dear friend who has tricky lungs and who struggles a lot. So all of us, I think, in this room can feel both sides of those issues. And I too bristle at the comment about not caring. I get it. We're arguing our case. But every one of us cares. I said that earlier. That's why we're here. That's why we're in this room. We all care. We're just not all in agreement. And we're on either side of a difficult topic. The whole point of the special council meeting was to get some consultation. What's the point of asking for consultation if we're not going to be given an opportunity to discuss it? And at that consultation, I attended the one in the evening. One thing struck me. It was, this woman sort of stood up and said, I didn't really even know that there was a bylaw, and I'm kind of surprised that the city has not even tried to engage with me or with us around the fact that you wanted to make these changes. So that goes back to us not having done this in the right order. And so for me, it wasn't done in the right order, so I can't support this. I understand administration, I understand, Chief Voisin, what you presented to us, but we should have done the consultation first. And so now, to be consistent, it's not a disrespect to administration, not at all, not ever, ever. But it's to be consistent with why I called a special meeting, why I wanted consultation to take place, and now I want to discuss it. That doesn't mean that I am going to vote for or against. No. I just wanted us to have a conversation around compromise. That's all. And I understand Councillor McIntosh and Councillor Lane, Councillor McDonald, your points about compromise. And I'm looking at the cities our size and those a little bigger that have done the ban. And this community needs to know that we may move in that direction. Cornwall is growing. This is the point. This is what we want. So the bigger we get, the more of a city we become, the more of these discussions are difficult. So stay tuned. We're not going to stay at 48,000. That's not the plan. And if we grow, then we have to take on more responsibilities as good neighbors, and it becomes difficult. To be consistent, I will not support this motion. I'm going to call for a vote.
Order vote, Madam Mayor.
Madam Clerk.
Just read the motion.
Yes, Councillor McIntosh asks for it to be reread.
That council receive this report and approve the proposed bylaw to cease the practice of open-air burning in the city of Cornwall. Councillors Claude McIntosh?
Yes.
Elaine McDonald?
Yes.
Sid Gardner?
Yes.
Dean Hollingsworth?
Opposed.
Katerina Nebile?
No.
Councillors Modest Dupel?
Yes.
Glenn Grant?
Yes.
Todd Bennett?
No.
Justin Towndell?
No.
Éric Bergeron?
No.
And Madam Mayor.
No.
But there's still a ban.
That is correct. Six against, so the motion is defeated.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I think I would like to allow the chief to speak on what that potentially would default to.
Through you,
Chief
Madam
Voisin,
Mayor,
yes.
In light of the fact that we have a council decision that ceases the practice of open-air fires, but yet we have no bylaw, then the jurisdiction becomes, we fall on the provincial legislation, which is a prohibition of burning, including fuel-based fires, is where we're at.
Mhm. So we're going to go to the next item.
Madam Mayor, if I may, I'm going to excuse myself.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Take care of yourself, Councillor Ibach.
Can you translate what the chiefs have said?
We have a ban.
You can't have a fire.
We're following provincial.
Councillor McIntosh is asking for Chief Voisin to repeat.
Sure. So without a bylaw, we will follow the Fire Protection and Prevention Act, which is the provincial legislation which prohibits open-air burning in the province, including our submission, which was the fuel-based appliances. So the bylaw essentially reverted to the provincial legislation, but allowed fuel-based appliances without permits. But in light of the fact that council hasn't or will not implement that bylaw, then it's a complete prohibition.
So as we ban, there's a
It's a
complete ban in the
ban.
city of Cornwall right now.
Correct.
Okay.
We're going to have further discussion about this at another time, because there are other times to have discussions. Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So a follow-up question, if I may, through you to the fire chief.
Yes, go ahead.
I'd like to know what the repercussions would be then if somebody were to burn a fire.
Through you, Madam Mayor, so under the provincial legislations, we would be issuing summons Part 1s or Part 3s under the fire code, which carries a variety of fine levels up to, I believe, $10,000.
So we're going to discuss this at another time. Administration is going to discuss this with us at another time. We have to move forward with the agenda.
It's done.
Right. So we're going to move forward to the next item on the agenda.
Good.
Waterfront park pop-up businesses with a recommendation that council direct administration to issue an RFP to solicit interest from entrepreneurs interested in leasing a small structure in Lamoureux Park for the purpose of operating a pop-up business.
Is there a motion? Councillor Bennett. The recommendation?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
It's okay. Take a minute.
I'm still,
wobble there.
Take a minute.
I'm still thinking about the last one.
Supporting issue.
Yeah.
I'm allowing Councillor Bennett a moment.
Yeah, just to be fine. I can't remember the exact thing.
So it's page 143.
My paper's your friend.
That was 148. God's sakes. There we go. Yes, so the motion is to direct administration, no, wait a second. Yes, to direct administration to issue a request for proposal to solicit interest from entrepreneurs interested in leasing a small structure in Lamoureux Park for the purpose of operating a pop-up business.
Councillor Bergeron seconds. Debate? Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I want to say I wholeheartedly support this initiative, and I'm really happy that it's going to be able to maybe happen this summer. And I just want to note that in the slide that Ms. Bergeron showed us, one of the slides pictured a series of tents. Now, I think at one point, Councillor Bennett, when he made this motion, talked about containers, but a string of anything with people out there interacting with others is just a really great sight to imagine happening here in Cornwall.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Councillor Bergeron?
Thank you. Fully support this. This is another example of something I would have prioritized in the budget over a lot of things. This is a bold idea that I think helps us bring people down to our waterfront. The motion, though, just so I'm clear, is for an RFP. It's not to approve $73,000 today.
Mr. Jamie Fothrop.
Through you, Madam Mayor, what we're looking to do is issue the RFP to solicit those proposals from entrepreneurs that want to enter into the pop-up park or want to occupy one of these structures. My understanding, and we stand to be corrected, if it is approved, that would be our budget that we would be proceeding with and to work within.
Thank you. Just want to make sure. So I still fully support it. I just wanted some clarity on where our dollars are being spent. I do question the need for $10,000 for signage and marketing, but first year, we're going to try this. The whole idea was that let's see what we can do to attract people down to our waterfront. I think this is exactly the kind of thing we need to be doing as a community. Thank you.
Councillor Towndale?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Definitely support this. I think it's a great initiative brought forward by my colleagues. It's nice to see where we are with this report and the potential for activity this summer. I think the concept of what these structures could look like, very appealing. Very good reuse of shipping containers as well. I know they may not look like this, but that's a good start. I think location's great. It's not where I had thought initially, but it makes a lot more sense. I did have two or perhaps one quick question. Actually, no, I do have two questions. So I read in the report that there were restrictions based on what the health unit was saying for food vendors because of water and the like. But I had a question because we currently have a food vendor in Lamoureux Park. He's got a mobile cart though, so I'm wondering if that's why he's able to operate in the park, whereas these structures wouldn't be able to accommodate a food vendor.
Mr. Fothrop.
Through you, Madam Mayor, that is correct. The vendor in Lamoureux Park qualifies as a mobile food premise, so he's able to bring water in tanks to the site and then brings the wastewater home with him at the end of the day, where they considered these structures to be more of a permanent nature and that they would require dedicated water and sewer services piped to their locations.
Yeah, thank you. And through you, Madam Mayor, I just had one more question. currently, I think it's the same vendor. There's a vending space in the splash pad in the washroom where there's a sorry.
Canteen?
A window.
Canteen.
Canteen, thank you. Thank you, Councilor McDonald. Jeez, that word totally just
I'm on your
canteen.
wavelength.
A canteen there. So I know, I don't know if he uses it or not, but is that currently in use? If not, is there a plan for it?
Mr. Fothra?
Get through you, Madam Mayor, yes, we do put that out for a proposal, and at this moment, the same vendor that operates by the splash pad also has the lease for to operate the canteen.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
Anybody else on this issue? Councillor McIntosh?
Through you to
Mhm.
Mr. Fothra. We're only gonna go with 4, or we waiting to see the band?
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes, the proposal is to test it out with 4, and then if successful, then consider.
After the season's over.
After the season's over, consider expanding.
And the licensing fee is $1,000
The
per
proposed
vendor?
fee is, what we're suggesting is $1,000.
Okay. Will we be looking for, like, you're gonna have 4 hot dog stands, or will you say, okay, there's only room for 1 food, 1 this, 1 this?
Through you, Madam Mayor, we're proposing not to consider food vendors for the servicing reasons.
Oh, really?
And so it would be more sort of services or retail. But I think, I mean, it's open to other possibilities, and which is why we're seeking proposals to see what precisely it is
Like
these entrepreneurs.
somebody selling T-shirts, I survived a day in Cornwall, or something like that?
Whoa.
I've seen those before. The interesting thing, I notice you've got underground electrical service, 12,500. Can we hook up lights to that?
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes, I do believe, we think that there should be lighting within the structures as well. I believe the vendors will
I'm talking about
require-
the lights, in the winter, we could hang lights in the tree using the underground service? Not much, but. to start.
Possibly, I mean, I think we'd be entering into sort of the realm of the previous report that was
Okay,
presented to
I
the
get
council.
you. And would these structures stay in the park during the winter?
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes, they would.
Okay.
Anybody else? Councillor Bennett?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you. So I've been looking forward to this for a while. Thank you, Jamie, for getting this to the stage it's at now. I absolutely appreciated our conversation we had back in October, and we were able to get on the same wavelength as kind of what my expectations were, and I think for the most part we're there. I do have a couple of questions because I'm just not sure what these are as far as the business cost estimate is. What is structure fit up?
Through you, Madam Mayor, that is installing electrical outlets and lighting within the structure. It'll likely require an electrical panel as
Okay.
well.
Okay. And the other one I had a question about was park reinstatement. I'm guessing that's what it's supposed to say, because
yes.
it doesn't say that now.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, that's to repair the sod, grass, any asphalt paths that we have to cross in order to extend electrical servicing to that location.
Okay, makes great sense. Now, the $1,000 rental fee, is this the cost that Belleville was doing? Like, where do we come with the $1,000?
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes, Belleville had a monthly fee of $300. In August, this past 2019, there was some media coverage, and the season didn't go quite as planned, and so they did talk about refunding the fees to these vendors, and it was $900. So instead of looking at a monthly fee, I think we're proposing just a seasonal fee.
I agree. And to be clear, the Belleville experiment didn't fail because it was a bad idea. It failed because the weather flooded the area where they wanted to have it. And so they had to move into another park, and that really kind of fizzled out because some people didn't want to move, so they backed out. So I know I did ask for us to see how they did, and then we'll jump on that, but it was kind of a failed experiment that are going to retry again next year.
That's correct.
Right? Okay, so just want to make that clear. Thank you. So, yeah, this is one of the things I've talked about, geez, long before I got elected. So, it's just something a lot of people, I think, have interest in. I've had some people, asking me, is that something anybody can have, or like, there was a lot of interest, so I'm thinking 4 is gonna be a good experiment. I don't think we're gonna have a problem filling 4. And as long as the community gets behind this, I would hope next year we could have 6 or 8, so. Thank you for the report. Thank you for, sitting down with Councillor Bergeron and myself, and so we all got on the same page here, and now I'm really looking forward to shopping in Lamoureux Park.
Anybody else? Anybody else on the first round? Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Question to Mr. Frothorpe, like it's for
Yes,
you.
please go ahead.
So is the process going to be that you're going to issue a public statement, a request for proposal, and the general public can just simply respond to you? Like, for example, I think of Focus Art, there are 80-some members, and as an organization, they might speak for one of those spaces and fund it with different artists, at different times, and that would be acceptable.
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes, so we're looking for, it could be a
So they
collective
should
group
watch
like
the
that.
city website then, I suppose, for the announcement when it goes out. Thank you.
Anybody else? I'll only say this, let's go. Let's just get this going. There's energy around this, there's, something new, an idea. I think it's great. Thank you, Council and Administration, for moving this forward. I hope there's going to be a lot of interest, and let's see what happens. That's the whole point of trying something new. All in favor? Carried.
Temporary street closure for Cornwall Food Fest. The action recommended is that council approve the temporary closure of Pitt Street from Water Street to 3rd Street and 1st Street from Pitt Street to Augustus Street, and of 1st Street from Augustus Street to Pitt Street, and of George Astley Lane on Saturday, August 15th, from 5:30 in the morning to 11 at night, subject to the requirement contained in the city's corporate policy on temporary street closures for special events. And B, that council approve a one-day exemption for bylaw 192/2005, mobile food premise, provision 32, 500 feet radius, and provision 40, public road prohibition on Pitt Street in order to accommodate food trucks on the street for the festival.
Moved by Councillor Dupel, Councillor Gardner. Discussion? All in favor? Carried.
Tenders and RFP. We have one, tender 71 Brookdale Avenue, North Sanitary Sewer Extension. The recommendation is this tender be awarded to Louis Bray Construction Limited from VARS at the total bid price of $10,774,033.60, including provisional items.
Moved by Councillor Towndale, seconded by Councillor Bennett. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried.
I have no new business motions, Madam Mayor.
Okay.
Moving on to bylaws, that bylaws 2020-35 to 41 inclusive, listed on the agenda, are being presented to council for adoption.
We're moving bylaw 40 separately.
Was one to read separately?
Yes, my apologies.
Thank
So
you.
let's do bylaws 35 to 39 and 41.
Is that clear? So a motion for that. Councillor Elaine McDonald, Councillor Gardner, all in favor? Carried.
And then a separate motion for bylaw 40, which is the smoking bylaw.
Moved by Councillor McDonald, seconded by Councillor Grant. Discussion.
Thank you, Your Worship. Swinging right to the bitter end here. I'm not going to support the bylaw, as I mentioned already. I think that it's, I don't want to put it, I don't think we have the human beings to enforce it. I don't think it's a practical bylaw in the sense that, we're talking, if I'm not mistaken, the length of the bicycle path, which means, in essence, if somebody were to go fishing, for example, towards the power dam, because the bicycle path kind of weaves its way down through there, nobody can smoke. It just doesn't seem to be a particularly practical bylaw to me. It seems to be a bylaw that becomes, if you thought the smoking ban would be tricky to enforce, this is 5 times worse. And quite frankly, Your Worship, as I've already expressed, we already have a no littering bylaw in the municipality that we can't enforce. So if we actually follow the core of that particular bylaw, people wouldn't be able to throw their butts on the ground because we have a bylaw that already says you can't throw your butts on the ground. And we're not really getting that done, so I won't support the bylaw. I get where people are trying to come from, but I just don't think it's practical, and therefore I'll vote against it.
Councillor Bergeron.
Thank you. I echo the sentiments of Councillor Hollingsworth, except that I would have also asked that it be brought out, vote on separately, simply so I could vote against it. We've already had a debate, so I'm not jumping back into that.
Councillor, thank you. Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. One thing I highlighted is offenses and penalties, and talks about a penalty up to $5,000 if you're convicted. To me, that'll get people's attention and reinforce the fact that they can't do it. And if they do and they get caught, it's a big fine. So I think that'll discourage people, and we don't need to have people manning that or womaning it
Personing
every day.
it. It's personing it.
What is it?
Personing it.
Oh, personing.
How about patrolling it?
Anyway, that's, so I think that'll discourage people, and if it improves it, 50%, that's a big improvement. So let's work it, and let's hope that people look at it and say, I don't want to be charged $5,000 if I get caught.
Anyone else? Councillor McDonald.
Madam Mayor, I think that the point of something like this is to establish a community standard. So whether we catch the malefactors or not, I think it's worth putting this on the books.
Councillor McIntosh.
Don't we need a bylaw to go past, vote to go past 10, or is it 11?
It's 11, Councillor McIntosh. Yep, we can keep going. I can, certainly. All in favor? Against? Carried.
Next on the agenda are reports from committees of council.
Any reports? Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I would just like to remind everybody that this Friday is Valentine's Day, and in honor of Valentine's Day, the arts community is having this huge event. It's called Sing Your Heart Out at the Arts Center on Pitt Street, 159 Pitt Street, starting at 4 o'clock with drumming and moving on to communal singing. All kinds of cupcakes and I guess cakes and this sort of thing that Councillor Sydney Gardner has been working on. So I invite everybody to come out 4 o'clock to 7 o'clock and then go for dinner somewhere on Pitt Street.
Thank you. Any other reports from standing committees? I think Councillor Bennett is helping with those cupcakes too, isn't he?
Oh, yeah, I'm not eating them as much, so I just have somebody else eat them.
You're delegating that.
I'm delegating the eating of cupcakes.
Anything else?
Done.
Next item.
The pending listing, pending business listing for Monday, February 10th is being presented to council to receive.
Motion? Councillor Bennett, Councillor Towndale. All in favor? Carried. Next item.
Confirming bylaw, Madam Mayor. A bylaw to confirm the proceedings of this evening, February 10th.
Moved by Councillor DePel, Councillor McDonald. All in favor? Carried. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Grant and Councillor Gardner. All in favor? Merci. Thank you.
What I was saying, Sid, is that some people didn't care about the result. That's how it translated, that wasn't. I was saying that we had a couple of consultations.
He said something that was,